Hey friends, welcome to the Horror Sleep. Almost 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these true park ranger horror stories, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. I'm Elijah Whitford, and I've been working as a park ranger for the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for 11 years, primarily along a remote stretch of coastline between Florence and Yakuts. If you've never been to the Oregon coast, let me paint you a picture. It's not like California with its sunny beaches and bikini weather. This place is cold, rugged, and downright brutal. We're talking about cliffs that drop steeply into the Pacific, jagged rocks that have sunk hundreds of ships, and an ocean that's more interested in killing you than inviting you for a swim. The fog here doesn't just roll in like some romantic movie scene. It consumes everything. One minute you can see clear to the horizon, the next you can't see your hand in front of your face. And the wind god, the wind out here, will cut right through every layer you're wearing. It howls through the shore pines with this sound that's almost human sometimes. Almost like someone screaming far away. It's the kind of place that reminds you real quick that nature doesn't give a damn about you or your plans, or whether you make it home that night. Most of my job involves pretty standard stuff during the busy season. Beach patrols, checking camping permits, making sure tourists aren't doing anything stupid like trying to climb on drift logs during high tide, or getting too close to the edge of unstable cliffs for that perfect Instagram photo. You'd be amazed how many people need to be told that, yes, the ocean really is that dangerous, and no, you can't outrun a sneaker wave. During tourist season, from about June through September, we get absolutely flooded with visitors from all over the country. Families hauling their massive RVs down Highway 101, retirees with their metal detectors looking for lost jewelry, college kids looking to party around illegal bonfires. My job is to make sure they all stay safe, follow the rules, and hopefully leave with all their fingers and toes intact. But come October, everything changes. The tourists clear out almost overnight, and suddenly it's just us year-rounders left to deal with the storms and the isolation. The coast becomes a completely different place. The beaches that were packed with people just weeks before turn into empty, windswept wastelands. The campgrounds sit vacant. The tide pools that had children squealing with delight become dangerous again, their true nature no longer hidden by the summer crowds. That's when you really get to know this coastline, and trust me when I say it, reveals things it keeps carefully hidden during the busy months. Things you wish you'd never seen. This story takes place in late November, about 4 years ago. The specific date was November 23rd. I remember because it was 2 days before Thanksgiving, and I'd been planning to drive down to Eugene to spend the holiday with my sister and her family. I was partnered that night with another ranger named Paige Ellery. Paige had transferred up from the Redwoods National Park about 6 months prior, and she was still getting used to how different the Oregon coast was from Northern California. The Redwoods, or inland forests, are tall and quiet and relatively safe. Our coast is exposed, violent, and unpredictable. But Paige was competent and quick to learn. She had good instincts, and she didn't spook easily, which is probably the most important quality you can have working out here. We'd been assigned to do overnight patrols of a particularly remote section of coastline about 15 miles south of Heseta Head Lighthouse. If you know the Oregon coast, you know Heseta Head. It's one of the most photographed lighthouses in America, sitting pretty on its cliff, with its white tower and red roof looking like something off a postcard. But the area I'm talking about is south of there. Way south. This section doesn't get a lot of foot traffic even during peak season because there's no easy beach access. You've got to hike down these steep trails through dense shore pine and salal brush just to reach the waterline. The forest here is thick and dark, even in daylight. The kind of forest where you could walk 20 feet off the trail and be completely lost. But we still patrol it regularly because every few years some overconfident hiker decides to explore the sea caves during low tide and ends up getting trapped when the tide comes back in. We've had to coordinate Coast Guard rescues more than once. And about 7 years ago we found a body down there. Some kid from Portland who'd slipped on wet rocks cracked his skull and drowned in a tide pool. His parents didn't even report him missing for 3 days. They thought he was just camping and out of cell range. The night in question started normally enough. I met Paige at the ranger station around 8 p.m. The sun had been down for almost 2 hours by then, and the temperature had already dropped into the low 40s. We geared up with our heavy-duty flashlights, extra batteries, radios, emergency first aid kits, and our standard wilderness survival equipment. Paige had brought a thermos of coffee and some granola bars. I had my usual peanut butter sandwiches and a can of Red Bull that I was saving for the drive back. "How's the forecast looking?" Paige asked as she adjusted her duty belt. "Fog," I said. "Heavy fog rolling in around 9. Visibility's gonna be shit." "Perfect," she muttered. "My favorite." We headed out in my truck, a beat-up Ford Ranger that had seen better days but was reliable enough for these back roads. The fog was already starting to settle in as we pulled out of the parking lot. Thick and low. My headlights barely cut through it, casting weak yellow beams that seemed to get swallowed up about 20 feet ahead of us. Paige sat in the passenger seat sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone, trying to get the last bits of signal before we drove into what we called the dead zone. That's the stretch of Highway 101 between mile markers 47 and 63. No cell service, no radio stations, just you and the sound of your own engine and the oppressive silence of the coastal forest pressing in on both sides of the road. Some of the other rangers joked that it was like driving into another dimension. Just darkness and fog, and the yellow dashes of the center line disappearing under your wheels. We drove in silence for about 20 minutes. Paige had given up on her phone and was just staring out the window at the wall of fog sliding past. Occasionally, we'd pass a reflective mile marker post or a sign warning about elk crossings, but mostly it was just darkness. The heater in my truck wheezed and rattled, but didn't put out much warmth. I could see my breath in the air. "You ever been down to Thornberry Point?" Paige asked suddenly. "The lighthouse?" "Yeah, couple times. Why?" "I drove past it last week during my day off. There's something about that place that just feels wrong, you know." I glanced at her. "Wrong how?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Just a feeling. It's been abandoned for 20 years now. But it doesn't look abandoned. It looks like someone just walked away yesterday and never came back. There's still furniture in some of the windows, curtains. I could swear I saw a coffee cup sitting on a windowsill." "People leave stuff behind all the time," I said, "especially in places like that. Too expensive to haul everything out." "Maybe," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. Thornberry Point Lighthouse. I knew the place she was talking about. It sat on a rocky promontory about 8 miles south of where we were headed. Built in 1903, it had guided ships through the treacherous waters off the Central Coast for almost 70 years before being decommissioned in 1971. After that, it had briefly served as a weather station, then later as a research outpost for some marine biology program at Oregon State. But by the mid-90s, the whole complex had been abandoned. The lighthouse tower itself was locked up tight, but the adjacent keeper's house and various outbuildings had been left to rot. Last I heard, there were plans to turn it into some kind of maritime museum, but funding had fallen through and the whole place just sat there, slowly being reclaimed by the elements. The thing about Thornberry Point is that it's not on any official tour maps. It's not accessible by car. You'd have to hike in about 2 miles through some pretty rough terrain to reach it. So it gets left alone. Every once in a while you'll get some urban explorer types trying to break in for photos, but mostly it just sits there in its isolated corner of the coast, forgotten. You ever hear any stories about that place? Paige asked. Stories? Yeah, like ghost stories, local legends, that kind of thing. I thought about it. Nothing specific. I mean, every old lighthouse has ghost stories, right? Keepers who went crazy from the isolation, ships that wrecked nearby, sailors whose bodies were never recovered, standard haunted lighthouse stuff. Right, she said. Standard stuff. Something in her tone made me look at her again. Why? You hear something? No, she said quickly. Too quickly. Just curious. We drove the rest of the way in silence. We reached the trailhead parking area around 9:15. It was completely empty as expected. Just a gravel lot surrounded by dense forest and the constant white noise of waves crashing against rocks somewhere below us in the dark. I parked near the trailhead sign, killed the engine, and we both sat there for a moment listening. Through the closed windows we could hear the wind moving through the trees. The distant thunder of surf. Nothing else. Ready? I asked. Paige nodded and we stepped out into the cold. The wind hit us immediately. It was coming straight off the ocean, carrying with it that particular smell of salt and kelp and something else. Something almost metallic. I've always noticed that about coastal air at night, especially when fog is rolling in. There's a sharpness to it that makes your sinuses ache. Makes you feel more awake, more alert. Some primal part of your brain recognizing that you're in an environment that could kill you if you're not careful. We clicked on our flashlights and started down the trail. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for single file, and it wound through thick vegetation that seemed to close in around us. Overhead, the canopy blocked out what little moonlight might have filtered through the fog. Our flashlight beams were the only source of light, cutting white circles through the darkness ahead. The trail was slick with moisture, every surface coated in a thin film of condensation. You had to watch your footing with every step because one wrong move and you'd be sliding down the slope into God knows what. The descent was steep, about a 40-degree angle in some places. We'd installed rope handholds along the worst sections a few years back after a hiker had broken their leg. I gripped the rope with one hand, flashlight in the other, and made my way down carefully. Behind me, I could hear Paige's boots scuffing on the dirt and small stones rolling away down the slope. Neither of us spoke. When you're hiking a trail like this at night, you save your breath and focus on not breaking your ankle. The forest around us was alive with small sounds. Branches creaking in the wind, water dripping from leaves, the rustle of some small animal moving through the underbrush. Normal sounds. The kind of sounds you learn to filter out after years of doing this job. But then I heard something that made me stop. It was faint, almost lost under the wind and surf. But it was there, a rhythmic, creaking sound, like a rope under tension, or a door swinging slowly back and forth. You hear that? I asked, looking back at Paige. She'd stopped too. The creaking? Yeah. We stood there listening. The sound continued for a few more seconds, then stopped. Probably just a tree, Paige said, branches rubbing together. Probably, I agreed. We continued down the trail, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That sound hadn't been natural. It had been too regular, too deliberate. But I told myself Paige was right. Just branches in the wind. Nothing to worry about. After about 15 minutes of hiking, the trail finally leveled out and we emerged onto the beach. The fog was even thicker here. It rolled across the sand and waves turned everything beyond about 30 feet into a wall of gray nothing. The ocean was invisible. We could hear it, the constant crash and hiss of waves on rocks, but we couldn't see it. It was disorienting, like standing in a void. Jesus, Paige muttered. This is worse than I thought. Yeah, I said. We'll do a quick sweep north and south, then head back. No point staying out here longer than we need to. We turned south and started walking along the shoreline. The tide was going out, exposing fields of slick black rocks covered in barnacles and mussels. Our boots crunched on coarse sand and small stones. Every so often, a larger wave would rush up the beach, forcing us to skip sideways to avoid getting our feet soaked. Cold water out here isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Get wet in 40-degree weather, and you're looking at hypothermia within an hour. We walked for maybe 10 minutes, sweeping our flashlights back and forth, checking for any signs of campers or anyone who might need help. Nothing. The beach was completely deserted. Just us and the fog and the relentless sound of the ocean. That's when I saw it. A light, a warm yellow glow, off to our left, higher up, somewhere on the cliff face. At first, I thought it was a reflection, maybe our flashlights bouncing off something. But when I moved my flashlight, the glow didn't change. It stayed steady, constant. I stopped walking. "Paige?" "I see it," she said. She'd stopped too. We both stood there staring at the light. It wasn't bright, it was dim and diffused by the fog, but it was definitely there. And it appeared to be coming from somewhere up on the cliffs where there shouldn't be anything except rocks and trees. "Could be another ranger," Paige suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. "No one else is scheduled for patrol tonight," I said. "And there's no trail up there, no reason for anyone to be climbing around in this weather. Campers. Illegal and stupid, but possible." We kept watching the light. It didn't move, didn't flicker, just that steady yellow glow cutting through the fog. "We should check it out," Paige said. Part of me wanted to argue. Part of me wanted to say, let's just finish the patrol and get out of here. But she was right. If someone was up there camping illegally, or worse, if someone was hurt and had lit a flare or something, we needed to investigate. "All right," I said, "but we stay together, no splitting up." We turned inland and started making our way toward the base of the cliffs. The terrain here was rough. Lots of driftwood piled up against the cliff face. Massive logs bleached white by the sun, and salt, some of them 3 or 4 feet in diameter. You had to climb over and around them. Our flashlights cast crazy shadows that seemed to move and shift. As we got closer to the cliffs, I realized where the light was coming from. Thornberry Point Lighthouse. It had to be. The angle was right, the distance was right, but that didn't make any sense. The lighthouse had been dark for decades. There was no electricity out there, no generator. The place had been completely shut down. "That's Thornberry Point," Paige said quietly. "Isn't it?" "Yeah," I said. "I think so." "How is that possible?" "It's not." We stood there at the base of the cliffs looking up. Through the fog, I could just barely make out the dark shape of the lighthouse tower, silhouetted against the slightly lighter sky. And there at the top in the lantern room, that steady yellow glow, like someone had lit an oil lamp up there. "Maybe it's kids," Paige said. "Urban explorers. People break into abandoned places all the time." "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. Something about this felt wrong. The thing you need to understand is that getting to Thornberry Point from where we were standing would require at least an hour of hiking through some of the roughest terrain on the coast. Steep trails that weren't maintained, loose rocks, slippery slopes, and that's in daylight. At night, in heavy fog, it would be borderline suicidal. But we couldn't just ignore it. If someone was up there, we needed to find out who and why. "All right," I said. "We'll hike up, but slow and careful. One wrong step and we're both going over the edge." Paige nodded. Her face looked pale in the backwash of our flashlights. We found what looked like an old trail leading up the cliff face. It was barely visible, just a faint depression in the earth and vegetation. Probably a path that had been used by lighthouse keepers a century ago. We started climbing. The ascent was brutal. The path switchbacked up the cliff at a steep angle. Every surface was wet and slippery. Roots and rocks jutted out waiting to catch your foot. I kept my flashlight pointed down, watching every step. Behind me, I could hear Paige breathing hard with exertion. We climbed for what felt like forever, but was probably only 20 minutes. My legs were burning. My lungs ached from sucking in the cold, damp air. But slowly the lighthouse got closer. The yellow glow got brighter. Finally, the trail leveled out, and we found ourselves standing on the rocky promontory where the lighthouse complex sat. Through the fog, I could make out the shapes of buildings. The lighthouse tower rising about 60 feet into the air. The keeper's house. A few smaller outbuildings. Everything dark and abandoned except for that light glowing in the lantern room at the top of the tower. "This is really weird," Paige whispered. "Yeah," I agreed. We approached the lighthouse slowly. Our flashlights swept across the buildings, broken windows, peeling paint. Vegetation growing up through cracks in the concrete. The whole place had that abandoned feel that's hard to describe. That sense that you're somewhere you're not supposed to be. The door to the lighthouse tower was closed. I tried the handle. Locked. "Great," Paige muttered. "Now what?" I swept my flashlight around the base of the tower. There had to be another way in. A window, maybe. Or a service entrance. That's when I saw the footprints. They were fresh. Pressed into the soft mud near the foundation of the tower. Boot prints, large ones. Size 11 or 12, maybe. And they led around the back of the building. "Someone's definitely here," I said, pointing at the tracks. We followed the footprints around to the back of the lighthouse. There, we found a service door that had been forced open. The frame was splintered, the lock broken. I pulled out my radio and keyed the mic. "Base, this is Ranger Whitford. We're at Thornberry Point, requesting backup. We have signs of forced entry and possible trespassers." "Stat," I tried again. "Base, do you copy?" More static. The radio was dead. Either we were too far out of range or the terrain was blocking the signal. "Shit," I muttered. "What do we do?" Paige asked. I thought about it. We could wait for backup, but that would mean hiking back down to the beach, getting cell service, and calling it in. That could take hours. By then, whoever was up there would be long gone. "We go in," I said. "But we're careful. If we run into anyone, we identify ourselves and tell them they're trespassing. We don't engage unless we have to." Paige nodded, though she looked nervous. I pushed the door open. It swung inward with a groan. Beyond was darkness. I raised my flashlight and stepped inside. The interior of the lighthouse was exactly as abandoned as I expected. Bare concrete walls. A spiral staircase rising up through the center of the tower. Trash scattered on the floor. The smell of mold and sea air. Our footsteps echoed as we crossed the threshold. I aimed my flashlight up the staircase. The yellow glow from above cast strange shadows on the walls. The stairs seemed to spiral up forever into the darkness. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Oregon State Parks. The building is off limits. We need you to come down." No response. Just the echo of my own voice bouncing back at me. We started climbing. The metal stairs rang under our boots. Every step announced our presence. About halfway up, I stopped to catch my breath. Paige was right behind me. "Still think this was a good idea?" she whispered. "No," I admitted. "But we're committed now." We kept climbing. The glow got brighter. I could feel my heart pounding. My hand instinctively went to my utility belt where I kept my pepper spray. I hoped I wouldn't need it. Finally, we reached the lantern room. The door was open. Light spilled out onto the stairs. I took a deep breath and stepped through. The lantern room was octagonal, with large windows on each side looking out over the coast. In the center of the room stood the old Fresnel lens, its hundreds of glass prisms catching and reflecting light, and sitting on the floor next to the lens was an old oil lamp. It burned with that steady yellow flame, casting everything in warm, dancing shadows, but the room was empty. No one was there. "What the hell?" Paige said, stepping up beside me. I walked over to the lamp and knelt down beside it. The flame was real. I could feel the heat radiating off the glass chimney. The wick was burning steadily. Someone had lit this recently. But who, and where were they? I stood up and swept my flashlight around the room. There was nowhere to hide. The space was completely open except for the lens mechanism. Maybe they heard us coming and went back down another way, Paige suggested. "There is no other way," I said. "The stairs are the only way up or down." "Then where are they?" I didn't have an answer. That's when I noticed the object sitting on the windowsill. A glass, half full of what looked like water. I walked over and touched it. Still cold. Condensation on the outside. "Paige," I said quietly. "Look at this." She came over. "Someone was just here." "Yeah, very recently." We both stood there looking at that glass. My mind was racing. Whoever had been up here had to have passed us on the stairs. There was no other explanation. But we'd been climbing that staircase for 5 minutes and we hadn't passed anyone. Hadn't heard anyone. "This doesn't make sense," Paige said. Her voice was shaking slightly. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." I looked out the windows. Through the fog, I could see the dark shape of the coast below us. The white foam of waves breaking against rocks. Everything looked gray and empty and hostile. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the glass of the window directly across from me, someone had written something. Written with a fingertip in the condensation that had formed on the inside of the pane. 3 words. "Leave right now." The letters were fresh, still wet, still dripping slightly. "Paige," I said. My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "We need to go." "What? Why?" I pointed at the window. She saw the writing and her eyes went wide. "Oh God," she breathed. We both turned at the same time and ran for the stairs. I don't know what we were running from. There was no one in that room with us. But every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of that lighthouse. We took the stairs as fast as we dared. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I ran. Behind me, I could hear Paige's footsteps and her rapid breathing. Down and down we went, our boots clanging on the metal steps, the sound echoing up and down the tower. We burst out of the service door and into the fog. Without speaking, we both started running across the promontory toward the trail that led back down to the beach. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if something was following us. We hit the trail and started descending. Too fast, way too fast for safety. But neither of us cared. We just wanted to get away from that place. Halfway down the trail, my boot slipped on wet rocks and I went down hard landing on my side. The impact knocked the wind out of me. My flashlight went flying into the bushes. For a moment, I just lay there in the dark trying to breathe. Paige's light found me. "Elijah, are you okay?" "Yeah," I gasped. "I'm fine. Keep going." She helped me to my feet. We found my flashlight and continued down the trail. More carefully this time, but still fast. When we finally reached the beach, I've never been so relieved to see open space in my life. We didn't stop until we were back at my truck. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking from adrenaline. Finally got the door open. We sat in the truck with the doors locked and the engine running. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. We just sat there, breathing hard, staring out at the fog. "What the hell just happened?" Paige finally asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. Someone was up there. Someone lit that lamp. Yeah. But there was no one there. I know. And that message. I know. We sat in silence again. My mind was trying to process what we'd just experienced, trying to find a rational explanation. But I couldn't. We should report this, Paige said. Report what? That we found an oil lamp burning in an abandoned lighthouse? That someone wrote a message on a window? They'll think we're crazy. Maybe we are crazy, she said. Maybe we both just had some kind of shared hallucination from the fog and the stress. Do you really believe that? She was quiet for a moment. No. I put the truck in gear and started driving back toward the main highway. Neither of us looked back at the cliffs where Thornberry Point Lighthouse sat in its fog-wrapped isolation, where a yellow light continued to burn in a place that had been dark for decades. We didn't talk about what happened that night, not to each other and not to anyone else. We filed our patrol report saying we'd found evidence of trespassing at Thornberry Point and recommended increased security. We didn't mention the lamp or the message or the glass of water or any of it. 3 days later, I drove past Thornberry Point during my day off. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe I was hoping to see something that would make sense of what had happened. I parked on the highway and walked to a viewpoint where I could see the lighthouse in the distance. It stood dark and silent on its rocky promontory. Abandoned, forgotten, but as I watched the sun started to set, the sky turned orange and purple. Shadows lengthened. And then, as the last light faded from the sky, I saw it again. That yellow glow in the lantern room. Steady, constant, burning where no light should be. I got back in my truck and drove away. I still work the Oregon coast. I still do patrols of that section of coastline. But I never go back to Thornberry Point. And when I'm down on the beach at night and I see that yellow glow burning through the fog, I turn around and walk the other way. Because whoever or whatever is keeping that light burning, they made it very clear that night that they want to be left alone. And I'm not about to argue with them. That's my story. Make of it what you will. All I know is that there are places along this coast, places that don't want to be found. Places that exist outside of our normal understanding. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough, you stumble into one of those places, and sometimes you stumble back out. But not always. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. That I saw the light that night, drove away, and never thought about Thornberry Point again. But that's not how these things work, is it? Once something like that gets under your skin, it stays there. Festering, growing, demanding answers you know you'll never get. The first few weeks after that night, I tried to go about my normal routine. Patrols, check-ins with the other rangers, the usual paperwork that comes with the job. Paige had requested a transfer to a different sector. She told our supervisor it was for personal reasons closer to where her family lived. But I knew the real reason. She couldn't handle being anywhere near that stretch of coastline anymore. I don't blame her. Some nights I still wake up seeing those words written in the condensation. Leave right now. The letters dripping down the glass like tears. But unlike Paige, I couldn't just leave. This was my territory, my responsibility, and more than that, I needed to understand what had happened up there. I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghosts or supernatural nonsense. I'm a rational guy, former Eagle Scout, 4 years of college studying environmental science. I deal in facts and evidence and logical explanations. Except there was no logical explanation for what we'd seen. So I started digging. Not officially. I couldn't exactly file a report saying I wanted to investigate paranormal activity at an abandoned lighthouse. But on my own time, I started researching the history of Thornberry Point. I spent hours in the basement archives of the Florence Public Library going through old newspapers and maritime records. I drove up to the Oregon Historical Society in Portland and spent a weekend digging through their collection. I even tracked down the family members of former lighthouse keepers and convinced them to talk to me. What I found was disturbing, not in an obvious way. There were no records of murders or mysterious disappearances, or any of the usual haunted lighthouse tropes you'd expect. But there was something there. A pattern. A thread of wrongness running through the history of the place like rot in timber. Thornberry Point Lighthouse began operation in March of 1903. The first keeper was a man named Samuel Morrison. He'd previously worked at lighthouses in Massachusetts and had an excellent record. Reliable. Experienced. The kind of keeper the lighthouse service valued. He moved into the keeper's house with his wife Margaret and their 7-year-old daughter Alice. Everything seemed normal for the first 6 months. Morrison kept detailed logs as was required. Weather conditions, ship sightings, maintenance performed on the equipment. His handwriting in those early entries is neat and precise, the mark of a careful, organized mind. But then in September of 1903, something changed. The entries in his log became increasingly erratic. The handwriting got sloppy, hard to read. He started making odd notations that had nothing to do with lighthouse operations. Things like, "Heard it again last night," and "The light wants to stay on," and "M says I'm imagining things, but I know what I heard." Then, in October, the log entries stopped altogether. The last entry, dated October 23, 1903, just says, "I can't anymore." 3 days later, a supply ship arrived for its scheduled visit. The crew found the lighthouse in perfect working order. The lamp was lit. Everything was maintained. But the keeper's house was empty. Samuel Morrison, his wife Margaret, and their daughter Alice were gone. No note, no indication of where they'd gone or why. All their belongings were still there. Food on the table, beds made. It was like they'd simply stepped out for a walk and never came back. The lighthouse service launched an investigation. Search parties combed the area for weeks. They checked with nearby towns, sent telegrams up and down the coast. But the Morrisons had vanished. No trace of them was ever found. The official report concluded that the family had most likely fallen from the cliffs during a storm, though no bodies were ever recovered. The lighthouse was assigned a new keeper and operations continued. But here's the thing. Over the next 70 years, Thornberry Point Lighthouse had 18 different keepers. The average tenure at other lighthouses along the coast was about 12 years. At Thornberry Point, it was less than 4, and when you read the reports and letters associated with each keeper, the same pattern emerges. They'd start out fine, normal, professional, but within a few months, strange things would start appearing in their logs. Unexplained sounds, equipment malfunctioning, and almost all of them mentioned the same thing, the light wanting to stay on. Lighthouse lamps in those days were carefully regulated. The keeper would light them at sunset and extinguish them at sunrise. It was a precise routine, part of the job. But at Thornberry Point, keepers consistently reported that the lamp would relight itself. They'd extinguish it in the morning, and by noon it would be burning again. They'd check the fuel lines thinking there was a leak. They'd inspect the ignition mechanism thinking it was faulty. But they never found anything wrong. Eventually, most of the keepers just gave up. They'd let the lamp burn during the day, file reports saying the equipment was malfunctioning, and request repairs that never seemed to fix the problem. Some of them lasted years like that. Others requested transfers within months. The last keeper before the lighthouse was decommissioned was a man named Albert Vaughn. He was there from 1968 to 1971. I actually managed to track him down. He's in his 80s now, living in a retirement home in Coos Bay. When I called him and mentioned Thornberry Point, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Why are you asking about that place?" he finally said. I told him I was doing historical research for the Parks Department, which was technically true. I just left out the part about seeing a lamp burning where no lamp should be. Another long silence. Then he said, "You've seen the light, haven't you?" My breath caught. "What?" "The light in the tower, at night. You've seen it." "How did you know?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because I've seen it too, every damn night for the last 50 years. He agreed to meet with me. I drove down to Coos Bay the following weekend. The retirement home was one of those depressing places that smells like cafeteria food and industrial cleaner. I found Albert in the common room sitting by a window, staring out at the gray sky. He was thin, almost skeletal. His hands shook slightly as he gestured for me to sit. "I knew someone would come eventually," he said. "Someone asking questions." I pulled out my notebook. "Mr. Vaughn, can you tell me about your time at Thornberry Point?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he started talking. And what he told me made everything I'd experienced seem almost mundane in comparison. Albert had been 32 when he took the keeper position at Thornberry Point. He'd been working for the Coast Guard and was looking for something quieter, more solitary. The lighthouse seemed perfect. Good pay, housing provided. Nothing to do but maintain the equipment and keep the light burning. He moved in during the summer of 1968 with his wife Helen. Things were fine at first, he said. Helen loved it, said it was peaceful. We'd sit out on the rocks in the evening and watch the sunset. She'd raid while I maintained the lamp. It was a good life. When did things change? About 2 months in, October. Same as it always is, I found out later. He looked at me with watery eyes. "You raid the logs, didn't you? You know about the other keepers." I nodded. "Then you know what's coming," he said. The sounds started first, footsteps in the tower at night. I'd be in the keeper's house and I'd hear someone climbing the stairs every single night, same time, around 2 a.m. I'd go check and there'd be no one there, but I could hear them, clear as day. "Your wife heard them too?" "Oh yeah, both of us. She thought maybe it was birds or rats getting into the tower. But it wasn't. It was footsteps, human footsteps, heavy, deliberate, going up and up and up those stairs until they reached the lantern room. Then they'd stop." "Did you ever see anyone?" He shook his head. "Never saw, but I felt. You know what I mean? That feeling when someone's watching you. That prickle on the back of your neck. I'd be working on the lamp, and I'd feel it. Someone standing right behind me. I'd turn around and there'd be nothing. But the feeling wouldn't go away." "What about the lamp? Did it relight itself?" "Every single day," he said. "I'd extinguish it at dawn like I was supposed to. Then by noon it would be burning again. I must have filed 100 reports. They sent technicians, electricians, even though it was an oil lamp. No one could figure it out. Eventually, they just told me to let it burn. Said, as long as it wasn't causing any problems, just to leave it." He paused, looked out the window. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. But that wasn't the worst part. What was? The woman. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "What woman?" "I don't know," he said. "I never saw her face, but Helen did. She saw her first, woke me up one night absolutely terrified, said there was a woman standing at the foot of our bed, just standing there watching us. I turned on the light and there was no one, but Helen was shaking so bad I thought she was having a seizure. Maybe it was a dream." He gave me a sharp look. "That's what I said. That's what I wanted to believe. But then I saw her too. About a week later, I was in the kitchen making coffee before dawn. The sun hadn't come up yet, and I saw her in the doorway, just a silhouette, standing perfectly still. She was wearing a long dress, old-fashioned, and her hair was long, hanging down past her shoulders. I couldn't see her face, it was too dark, but I knew she was looking at me. "What did you do?" I froze, couldn't move, couldn't speak. She stood there for maybe 10 seconds, then she turned and walked away. Just walked right through the wall where the door used to be before they renovated. "Did you tell anyone?" Who would I tell? The Coast Guard? They'd think I was crazy. Helen wanted to leave, she begged me. But I thought I could handle it. I thought it was just stress or lack of sleep or something. I was an idiot. What happened? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. December of 1970, 3 days before Christmas. Helen was 6 months pregnant with our first child. We'd been planning to transfer after the baby was born, just had to make it through one more winter. But that night, he trailed off. "What happened that night, Mr. Vaughn?" The footsteps came, like always. 2 a.m., going up the tower stairs. But this time, Helen got out of bed. I asked her what she was doing. She said she needed to see, needed to know what was up there. I tried to stop her, but she was determined. She put on her robe and went outside. I followed her. She went into the lighthouse. He nodded. She had a flashlight. I was right behind her. We climbed those stairs, round and round. I kept calling her name, telling her to stop, but she wouldn't listen. It was like she was in a trance. When we got to the lantern room, she walked right to the window, the same window that faces east, and she just stood there, looking out at the ocean, at the darkness. "Did you see the woman?" "No, but Helen did. She started talking to her. I couldn't hear what the woman was saying, but I could hear Helen's responses. She was asking questions. What happened to you? Why are you here? What do you want? Things like that. And she was getting more and more agitated. Her voice was rising. She was crying. What were the answers? I don't know. I couldn't hear. But whatever that woman told her, it was bad. Helen started screaming, backing away from the window. And that's when I saw it. Saw what? Her reflection. In the glass. The woman's reflection. She was standing right next to Helen, close enough to touch. And her face. He closed his eyes. I only saw it for a second. But it was wrong, all wrong. Her mouth was open too wide. And there was water, running down her face, pouring out of her mouth. Like she'd drowned. Jesus, I breathed. I grabbed Helen, pulled her away from the window. We ran, got down those stairs faster than I thought possible. Back to the house, locked every door, every window. We huddled in our bedroom until sunrise with the lights on. Didn't sleep, didn't talk, just waited. Did you leave? First thing in the morning. We packed what we could carry and left everything else. I didn't even wait for a replacement. I filed my resignation by telegraph from Florence. We never went back. Not once. And the baby? His face crumpled. Helen miscarried 2 days later. The doctor said it was stress, but I know what it was. That thing in the lighthouse. That woman, she took our child. We sat in silence. I didn't know what to say. How do you respond to something like that? The lighthouse was decommissioned about 6 months after we left, he said. They said it was due to budget cuts, but I think they knew. I think they'd known for years that something was wrong with that place. They just didn't know what to do about it. Mr. Vaughn, do you have any idea who the woman was, or why she's there? He shook his head. I spent years trying to find out. Went through every record I could find, every newspaper archive, looking for any woman who might have drowned near Thornberry Point. Found dozens. The coast has always been dangerous. But I could never find anything that fit. Nothing that explained why she'd be there in the lighthouse. Do you still see the light? "Every night," he said. "Doesn't matter where I am. I can be in my room here on the 3rd floor, miles from the coast, and I can still see it. Like it's burned into my vision. That yellow glow, always there, always watching." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. "You're going to go back, aren't you?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Don't," he said. "Whatever you think you'll find there, whatever answers you're looking for, it's not worth it. That place wants something. It's been wanting it for over 100 years. And it's still waiting, still watching, still keeping that light burning. Wanting what? I don't know. But I think it's why the Morrison family disappeared. I think they gave it whatever it wanted. Or maybe it just took what it needed. Either way, they're gone. And if you go back, you might be gone too." I left the retirement home with more questions than answers. The drive back up the coast took 3 hours. The whole time I couldn't stop thinking about what Albert had told me. About the woman, about Helen, about the light that wouldn't go out. When I got back to Florence, I went straight to the library. If there was something in the records I'd missed about women drowning near Thornbury Point, I needed to find it. I pulled every newspaper from 1900 to 1910, went through them page by page, and that's when I found it. A small article buried on page 6 of the October 24th, 1903 edition of the Florence Gazette. The headline read, "Woman Found Dead Near Thornbury Point." The article was brief. A local fisherman had found the body of a woman washed up on the rocks near the lighthouse. She'd been in the water for at least several days. The body was severely decomposed, making identification difficult. She was described as being in her late 20s or early 30s with long, dark hair and wearing a dark blue dress. The authorities had ruled it an accidental drowning. The assumption was that she'd been on one of the ships that had passed through the area and had somehow fallen overboard. There was no mention of any missing persons report matching her description. No follow-up articles. She was just another anonymous victim of the ocean, buried in an unmarked grave and forgotten. But here's what caught my attention. The date she was found, October 23rd, 1903. The same day Samuel Morrison made his final log entry. The same day he wrote, "I can't anymore." The same day he and his family vanished. That couldn't be a coincidence. I sat there in the library staring at that article until they kicked me out at closing time. Then I sat in my truck in the parking lot staring at nothing, thinking. Samuel Morrison had been the lighthouse keeper when that woman's body was found. He would have known about it. Maybe he even saw the body. Did he recognize her? Did he know who she was? Is that what drove him to write those cryptic entries in his log? Is that why his family disappeared? And if the woman's ghost was haunting the lighthouse, was she looking for something? Looking for someone? Or was she just trapped there reliving whatever tragedy had ended her life over and over for more than a century? I didn't have answers, but I knew where I might find them. I had to go back to Thornbury Point. I should have listened to Albert Vaughn. I should have left it alone. Accepted that some mysteries don't have answers and moved on with my life. But I've never been good at leaving things alone. My ex-wife used to say it was my fatal flaw. That I'd worry at a problem like a dog with a bone until there was nothing left, but I still couldn't let go. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to go back. 3 weeks of bad sleep and worse dreams. Dreams where I was climbing those spiral stairs over and over, hearing footsteps ahead of me but never catching up. Dreams where I stood in the lantern room, watching words appear in the condensation on the windows. Different words each time, but always warnings, always telling me to leave. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. If I'd mentioned it to my supervisor, he would have ordered me not to go. If I'd told any of the other rangers, they would have thought I'd lost my mind. so I kept it to myself. I chose the darkest night I could find. New moon, cloud cover. I waited until my shift ended at 6 p.m., then drove north to the trailhead. I arrived around 7:30 just as the last light was fading from the sky. The parking lot was empty, as I'd known it would be. No one came out here this time of year, especially not after dark. I sat in my truck for a while. Engine running, heater on, telling myself I could still turn around, drive back to Florence, forget the whole thing. But I knew I wouldn't. I'd come this far. I needed to know. Finally, I turned off the engine, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out into the cold. The hike up to Thornberry Point was even worse than I remembered. The trail was slick with rain from earlier in the day. Twice I nearly lost my footing on the steeper sections. The forest around me was alive with sound. Wind through the branches. Small animals rustling in the undergrowth. The distant thunder of surf on rocks. Normal sounds. But my nerves were so on edge that every snap of a twig made me jump. It took me 45 minutes to reach the lighthouse complex. When I finally emerged from the tree line, I stopped and just stood there looking at it. The tower rose black against the slightly lighter sky. The keeper's house sat dark and silent. Everything was as abandoned as it had been the last time, except for one thing. The light was burning. That steady yellow glow in the lantern room at the top of the tower, exactly as I'd seen it before. I stood there for a long time watching it. Part of me wanted to turn around, run back down that trail, and never come back. But I'd made a promise to myself. I was going to find out what was in that lantern room, what was keeping that light burning. I approached the tower slowly. The service door was still broken from when Paige and I had found it forced open. I pushed it inward and stepped inside. The interior was exactly as I remembered. Bare walls, spiral staircase, the smell of salt and decay. I could see the glow from above casting moving shadows on the walls. I raised my flashlight and started climbing. Each step echoed in the enclosed space. I climbed slowly, carefully, counting the stairs as I went. 73, 74, 75. About halfway up, I stopped to catch my breath. That's when I heard it. Footsteps above me. They were quiet but distinct. The sound of shoes on metal stairs, coming down toward me. I froze, my flashlight beam pointed upward, illuminating the curved wall of the stairwell above me. I waited. The footsteps got closer, closer. I could hear them clearly now, heavy, deliberate. A man's tread. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded thin and scared even to my own ears. "This is Park Ranger Whitford. Identify yourself." The footsteps stopped. Silence. Complete and total. Even the wind outside seemed to have stopped. Then slowly, the footsteps started again. But now they were going back up. Away from me. I listened as they climbed higher and higher until they reached the lantern room. Then they stopped. I stood there on that staircase, breathing hard, my heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct I had was telling me to leave, to get out while I still could. But I'd come this far. I wasn't turning back now. I continued climbing, up and up the spiral stairs. The yellow glow got brighter. I could feel heat radiating down from above. My legs burned with exertion. My hands were shaking. Finally, I reached the top. The door to the lantern room stood open. Light spilled out onto the stairs. I took a deep breath and stepped through. The room was exactly as it had been before. The Fresnel lens in the center, the windows looking out over the dark ocean, and sitting on the floor next to the lens, the oil lamp burning with its steady yellow flame. But this time the room wasn't empty. Standing at the eastern window looking out at the night was a man. He wore old-fashioned clothing, dark trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, suspenders. His hair was dark and neatly combed. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mr. Morrison?" I said quietly. He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me in any way, just kept standing there looking out at the darkness. "Samuel Morrison?" I tried again. This time he moved. Slowly he turned to face me, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. He looked younger than I'd expected. Maybe 35, handsome features, dark eyes, but there was something wrong with those eyes. They were empty, hollow, like windows looking into nothing. "She's still out there," he said. His voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I have to keep the light burning, so she can find her way back." "Who?" I asked, though I thought I knew. "Margaret," he said. "My wife, she went down to the rocks that morning to gather mussels for dinner. She liked to do that, collect them at low tide, but she didn't come back. I searched for her, called her name, but the fog came in and I couldn't see. I couldn't find her. Mr. Morrison," I said gently, "your wife isn't out there. Neither is your daughter. They're gone. They've been gone for over 100 years. He shook his head slowly. "No, she's still out there, lost in the dark. I have to keep the light burning. That's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. Keep the light burning so the ships don't wreck, so people don't get lost." "The ships don't need the light anymore," I said. "They have modern equipment now, GPS, radar. The lighthouse was decommissioned decades ago." "I can't leave," he said. "Not until she comes back. I promised her. I promised Alice. I said I'd keep them safe, but I failed. The fog came and she got lost and I couldn't save her." "Morrison, I don't think your wife got lost in the fog. I think something else happened. I think there was a woman who drowned. You found her body, didn't you?" "On October 23rd, 1903. His face changed, a flicker of recognition, of memory. "The woman," he whispered. "Yes, I found her, washed up on the rocks below the tower. She'd been in the water for days. Her face was—" He trailed off, shuddered. "What happened after you found her?" "She started appearing in the keeper's house in the tower. Margaret saw her first, said there was a woman in Alice's room, standing over her bed, watching her sleep. I told her she was imagining things, that it was just stress. But then I saw her too, in the lantern room. She was standing right where you are now, looking at me with those terrible eyes. What did she want?" "She was angry," he said. "So angry, she blamed me, said I should have saved her, that the light should have been bright enough, that if I'd done my job properly she wouldn't have died." "That's not true," I said. "You couldn't have saved her. If she fell off a ship, there was nothing you could have done. But she kept coming back," he continued as if he hadn't heard me. "Every night, getting closer, more aggressive. She'd stand at the foot of our bed, touch Margaret's face while she slept. I could see the wet handprints on the sheets in the morning. Then she started going after Alice. My little girl would wake up screaming, saying the drowned lady was in her room, saying she wanted to take her to the water." His voice broke. Tears ran down his face. I had to protect them. I had to make her stop. So I made a deal with her. I told her I'd stay. I'd keep the light burning, forever. I'd never leave. And in exchange, she'd leave my family alone. Let them go. "Oh God," I breathed. "Morrison, what did you do?" "I told Margaret to take Alice, to leave in the middle of the night while the woman was distracted, to run and never come back. And they did. They got away, made it to Portland, changed their names, started over. I got one letter from Margaret months later. She said they were safe, that Alice was doing well, that they thought of me every day, but they could never come back, because if they did, she might find them. "And you stayed here," I said. "Alone." He nodded. "I kept my promise. I tend the light. I keep it burning. Even after they shut down the lighthouse officially, even after they locked the doors and boarded up the windows. I'm still here, still doing my duty." "Morrison," I said quietly, "you're dead. You died here, alone, over a century ago." "I know," he said simply, "but I can't leave. The bargain was forever. Forever is a long time." We stood there looking at each other. Him in his century-old clothing, me in my park ranger uniform. Two men separated by more than 100 years, but connected by this cursed place. "Is she here?" I asked. "The drowned woman?" He nodded toward the western window. "She's always here. She can't leave either. The ocean took her, and it won't let her go. So she haunts this place, takes her anger out on anyone who comes here, anyone who stays too long." I looked at the western window. At first I saw nothing, just my own reflection in the dark glass. But then as I watched, something began to appear. A shape, a figure, standing on the other side of the glass. A woman in a long dress, her hair hanging wet and lank around her face. And when I saw that face, I understood why Albert Vaughn's wife had screamed. It was the face of someone who'd drowned and been in the water too long. Bloated, discolored, the eyes milky and dead, the mouth hanging open impossibly wide, and water, so much water, running down her face, pouring from her mouth, dripping from her hair. An endless stream of seawater from a body that should have been dry for over 100 years. She raised one hand and pressed it against the glass. The palm left a wet print. She tilted her head slowly, regarding me with those dead eyes. And then she smiled, a horrible, rictus grin that showed too many teeth. "You should go," Morrison said. "Now, while you still can. She's deciding whether to let you leave or not." I didn't need to be told twice. I backed toward the door slowly, not turning my back on the window, not taking my eyes off that terrible face. The woman's grin widened. Water continued to pour from her mouth, running down the glass. "Morrison," I said, "come with me. Leave this place." He shook his head. "I can't. I made a bargain. But you can. Go. Run. Don't look back." I reached the doorway, started down the stairs. Behind me, I heard Morrison's voice one last time. "And don't come back. Tell them to stay away. All of them. This is her place now. She won't let it go." I ran down those stairs faster than I'd ever run anything in my life. My boots rang on the metal steps. My flashlight beam bounced wildly. Behind me, I could hear something following. Not footsteps this time. Something worse. The sound of water. Flowing, rushing. Like a wave crashing against rocks. I burst out of the service door and into the night. Didn't stop running until I reached the trail. Only then did I look back. The tower stood dark against the sky. And in the lantern room at the top, that yellow light burned. And silhouetted against it, I could see two figures. One standing tall and still. The other, smaller, hunched, moving with a horrible fluid motion around and around the room. I turned and ran down the trail. Branches whipped my face. Roots tried to catch my feet. But I didn't slow down. Not until I reached my truck. I threw myself into the driver's seat, started the engine, and peeled out of the parking lot in a spray of gravel. I drove straight through to Florence. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. When I got home, I locked every door and window, turned on every light, sat in my living room with my service weapon on the table next to me and waited for dawn. Nothing happened. No sounds outside. No wet footprints appearing on my floor. No drowned woman pressing her face against my windows. The night passed and the sun came up and I was still alive and still sane. Or at least as sane as I'd been before. That was 4 years ago. I still work for Oregon Parks and Recreation. I still patrol the coast between Yakuts and Florence. But I don't go near Thornberry Point anymore. I've told my supervisor that section of coastline is off limits due to dangerous trail conditions. He didn't argue. I think maybe he knows. Or maybe he doesn't want to know. Sometimes at night when I'm driving Highway 101, I'll look south toward where Thornberry Point sits on its lonely promontory. And sometimes I'll see that yellow glow in the darkness, still burning, still waiting. Samuel Morrison, keeping his eternal vigil. The drowned woman circling and circling in her rage and grief. And I know that one day the lighthouse will claim someone else. Some hiker will ignore the warnings. Some urban explorer will force their way inside. Some curious person like me will decide they need to know the truth. And they'll climb those stairs and they'll see the light and they'll meet the keeper and the drowned woman. And maybe they'll make it out like I did. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll join Morrison in his vigil. Or maybe the woman will finally take what she's been looking for all these years. Another soul to join her in the water. Another victim to share her rage. I don't know, and I don't want to know. All I know is that there are places along this coast that exist outside normal understanding. Places where the dead don't rest. Where bargains made in desperation echo through the decades. Where lights burn that shouldn't be burning. And Thornberry Point Lighthouse is one of those places. If you ever find yourself on the Oregon coast between Yakuts and Florence, and you see a yellow light glowing in the distance on a dark night, do yourself a favor. Turn around. Walk the other way. Don't go investigating. Don't try to satisfy your curiosity. Because that light isn't there to guide you home. It's there to mark a boundary. A warning. A sign that says some places are not meant for the living. And if you ignore that warning, if you climb those stairs and enter that lantern room, you might find answers to questions you didn't know you had. But you'll also find something else, something that's been waiting there for over 100 years. Something angry and hungry and patient. Something that won't let you leave. I learned that lesson. I got out with my life and most of my sanity. But I think about Samuel Morrison sometimes. About the choice he made to protect his family. About the price he paid and continues to pay. About whether there's any way to break that curse and set him free. I don't think there is. Some bargains can't be broken. Some debts can't be paid. Some lights just keep burning no matter what. Forever is a long time. And Morrison agreed to forever. So if you ever meet someone who works the Oregon coast and you ask them about Thornberry Point, don't be surprised if they change the subject. Or if they tell you they don't know anything about it. Or if they just give you a look and say nothing at all. Because we know. We've all heard the stories. Some of us have seen the light. And a few of us, very few, have made the climb and lived to tell about it. But we don't talk about it. Not really. Not in any detail. Because some things are better left alone. Some mysteries don't need solving. Some places are meant to be forgotten. Thornberry Point is one of those places, and I hope to God it stays forgotten, but I know it won't, because that light keeps burning. And lights are meant to be seen. They're meant to draw people in, to promise safety and shelter and answers. That's what makes them so dangerous. That light at Thornberry Point doesn't promise anything except this. Come closer and find out what happened here. Come closer and learn the truth. Come closer and maybe you'll be the one who solves the mystery. But the truth is the mystery doesn't want to be solved. It wants to be fed. And that light just keeps burning. Waiting for the next person to climb those stairs. The next person to make a bargain. The next person to join the keeper in his eternal vigil. I hope it's not you. But if you find yourself standing in that lantern room with Samuel Morrison and the drowned woman, remember what I told you. Remember that some bargains have a price. Remember that forever is a long time. And remember to run, if you still can. My name is Morgan Tate, and I've been a park ranger with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for the past 8 years. Most people think being a coastal ranger is all about beautiful sunsets and helping tourists find the best tide pools. And sure, that's part of it during the summer months. But what they don't see is the other side of the job. The part where you're the first responder when someone goes missing. The part where you're searching cold, dark beaches at 3 in the morning looking for someone who went out for a sunset walk and never came back. The part where you find things washed up on shore that make you question everything you thought you knew about the ocean. This story is about one of those things. I work the Central Oregon coast, specifically the stretch between Newport and Waldport. It's about 20 miles of some of the most rugged and beautiful coastline you'll ever see. Rocky headlands that jut out into the Pacific. Long, sandy beaches that seem to go on forever. Tide pools teeming with life. And an ocean that can go from glassy calm to raging storm in the span of an hour. People underestimate the Pacific up here. They see it on a nice day in July when the sun is shining and the water looks almost inviting, and they think it's safe. But this ocean is never safe. The water temperature hovers around 50 degrees even in summer. The currents are unpredictable and vicious. Sneaker waves can appear out of nowhere and drag you out before you even realize what's happening. And once the ocean has you, it doesn't often give you back. I learned that lesson early in my career. It was my second month on the job. A family from California had been playing on the beach near Seal Rock. The dad had turned his back for just a moment to grab the picnic basket from their car. When he looked back, his 6-year-old son was gone. Just gone. We searched for 3 days. Coast Guard, local fire department, search and rescue teams, volunteers from town. We found the boy's body on the 4th day washed up 12 miles down the coast. The ocean had kept him for those 3 days before deciding to give him back. That's the thing about the Pacific. It takes what it wants when it wants. And sometimes it gives things back, but not always the way you'd expect. The incident I'm about to tell you about happened last October. October is a strange time on the Oregon coast. The summer tourists have mostly cleared out, but you still get people coming through. Photographers chasing stormlight. Retirees in RVs making their way down Highway 101. And then there are the ones who come looking for something else. Solitude, maybe. Or answers to questions they can't quite articulate. The coast has a way of attracting people like that, especially in the fall when the weather turns and the days get shorter. I was working the early morning shift that day. Started at 5 a.m., which meant I was out on the beach by 5:30, just as the first gray light was starting to seep into the sky. The fog was thick that morning, so thick I could barely see 20 feet in front of me. The kind of fog that muffles sound and makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. I was doing my standard patrol walking the beach between Ona Beach and Seal Rock, checking for any hazards, making sure no one had set up an illegal camp, looking for anything unusual. The tide was going out, which meant the beach was wider than usual. The waves sounded distant and muffled in the fog. I'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when I saw it, a shape on the sand ahead of me, dark and unmoving. My first thought was driftwood. We get massive logs that wash up all the time, some of them the size of small cars. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a log. It was a backpack. Now, finding stuff on the beach isn't unusual. People lose things all the time. Shoes, hats, beach toys, coolers. But there was something about this backpack that immediately felt wrong. It was sitting upright on the sand, perfectly positioned like someone had carefully set it down and walked away. Not tumbled or half buried like something that had been rolled around in the surf. Just sitting there, waiting. I approached it slowly. Professional habit. You never know what you're going to find. Could be full of someone's camping gear, could be full of drugs, could be nothing. I pulled my flashlight off my belt and aimed it at the pack. It was a standard hiking backpack. Maybe 40 liters. Dark green with black trim, good quality. North Face or something similar. It looked relatively new, no major wear or damage. And here's the thing that made me stop and really look at it. It was completely dry, not damp, not salt-crusted, not covered in sand and kelp like something that had been in the ocean. Completely dry, like it had just been pulled out of someone's closet. But that didn't make sense. The tide had been high just a few hours earlier. This section of beach would have been underwater. Anything sitting here should have been soaked through, should have been rolled around by the waves, should have shown some sign of being in the water. But this pack looked like someone had walked up 2 minutes ago and set it down. I keyed my radio. Base, this is Ranger Tate. I've got a found item on the beach near mile marker 149. Backpack. Appears abandoned. I'm going to check it for ID. Copy that, Tate, came the response. Keep us posted. I pulled on a pair of gloves and knelt down beside the pack. The zippers slid open easily. No resistance like there would be if they'd been corroded by salt water. I opened the main compartment and shone my flashlight inside. The contents made my skin prickle. Everything inside was organized, carefully packed. There was a fleece jacket rolled up tight, a water bottle full of clean water, a bag of trail mix, a first aid kit, a compact sleeping bag, everything you'd need for a day hike or an overnight camping trip. And just like the pack itself, everything was completely dry. No moisture, no sand, no sign of water damage at all. I pulled out the items one by one, checking for anything that might identify the owner. At the bottom of the main compartment, I found a wallet. Inside was a driver's license issued by the state of Oregon. The photo showed a man in his early 40s with sandy brown hair and a slight smile. His name was printed clearly on the license. Marcus Holden, age 43. Address in Eugene. I felt my stomach tighten. People don't usually abandon their wallets. Not intentionally. I kept digging. In one of the side pockets I found a cell phone. The screen was locked, but I could see missed call notifications. Lots of them. I also found a folded map of the Oregon coast. It had been marked up with pencil, circles around certain beaches, X marks at specific points. And at one location just south of where I was standing, someone had written in red ink, "I'm coming." Not "I'm here" or "camp here," or any of the usual annotations you'd see on a hiking map. Just "I'm coming." Present tense, like whoever wrote it was still on their way. I sat back on my heels and looked out at the fog-shrouded ocean. Something was very wrong here. I pulled out my radio again. "Base, this is Tate. I've got an ID on the pack owner. Marcus Holden, Oregon license. I'm going to need you to run his name through missing persons. Stand by." I waited. The fog swirled around me. The waves continued their rhythmic crash and hiss on the shore. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that somewhere out in that gray void someone was looking at me. I told myself it was just nerves, just the isolation and the early morning playing tricks on my mind. "Tate, this is Base," the radio crackled. "We've got a hit on that name. Marcus Holden was reported missing 2 days ago, last seen at the Ona Beach parking area. His vehicle is still there. Coast Guard conducted a search, but found nothing. Case is still active. 2 days ago." I looked at the backpack again, at the dry fabric, at the organized contents, at the map with its red ink message. "Base, I need you to contact the lead investigator on the Holden case. Tell them I've found his pack on the beach near Seal Rock, and tell them..." Tell them something's not right about this. Copy that. What do you mean, not right? The pack is dry, I said, completely dry, like it was never in the water. There was a pause. That's not possible. The tide's been up and down twice since he went missing. I know, I said, but I'm telling you this pack is dry. We'll send someone out. Stay with the evidence. I acknowledged and signed off. Then I sat there on the cold sand next to that impossible backpack and waited. The fog showed no signs of lifting. If anything, it seemed to be getting thicker. I could hear the waves, but I couldn't see them anymore. Just gray. Gray everywhere. That's when I heard the voice. It was faint. So faint, I thought I was imagining it at first. A man's voice calling out. Not words exactly, just a sound. A cry, coming from somewhere out in the fog, toward the water. I stood up fast. Hello? I called out. Is someone out there? No response. Just the waves. I waited, listening hard. Then I heard it again. Closer this time, a voice calling. It sounded distressed, panicked. This is Park Ranger Tate, I shouted. If you can hear me, call out. I'm here to help. Silence. Then the voice again, but this time I could make out the words. Help me. My training kicked in. I grabbed my emergency kit and started moving toward the water, toward the voice. Keep calling out, I yelled. I'm coming to you. Help me, the voice said again. It sounded closer. I can't get back. Where are you? I was at the waterline now. Waves lapped at my boots. I swept my flashlight back and forth, but the beam just got swallowed by the fog. Keep talking. Let me find you. Morgan. I froze. The voice had said my name, but I hadn't told anyone my name. I'd identified myself as Park Ranger Tate, not Morgan. Who is this? I called out. My voice sounded shakier than I wanted it to. How do you know my name? Morgan, the voice said again. And now I could tell it was coming from different directions. First to my left, then my right, then from behind me. Morgan, help me. I spun around, flashlight searching. Nothing. Just fog and sand and that backpack sitting where I'd left it 30 feet up the beach. This isn't funny, I shouted. Identify yourself. I'm coming, the voice said, and I realized with a chill that ran straight through me that the voice sounded exactly like the radio calls I'd heard earlier. Same tone, same cadence, like someone playing back a recording. Morgan, it said again. I'm coming. And then I remembered the map, the red ink. I'm coming. I backed away from the water. Slowly at first, then faster. I didn't turn my back on the ocean. Some instinct told me that would be a mistake. The voice kept calling, my name, over and over. But I ignored it, just kept backing up until I reached the backpack. Then I grabbed it and ran. I ran up the beach toward the parking area where I'd left my truck. My boots kicked up sand. My breath came in gasps. Behind me, the voice continued calling, but I didn't look back. Didn't slow down. Not until I reached my vehicle and had the doors locked and the engine running. I sat there in the driver's seat, breathing hard, hands shaking on the steering wheel. The windows were fogging up from my breath. I turned on the defroster and the wipers. Through the windshield, I could see the beach disappearing into the fog. I couldn't see the waterline anymore. Couldn't see where I'd been standing, but I could still hear the voice. Faint and distant now, but still calling, still saying my name. I grabbed my radio. Base, this is Tate. I need backup at my location. Now. Tate, what's your situation? Just send someone, I said, and tell them to be careful. Within 20 minutes, another ranger arrived, Jonas Mercer. He was in his 50s, ex-Coast Guard. He'd been working this coast for almost 30 years. If anyone had seen weird shit before, it was Jonas. He pulled up next to my truck and got out. I rolled down my window. "You all right?" he asked. His face was creased with concern. "Yeah," I said. "I think so. Did you hear anything on your way here? Any voices?" He frowned. "Voices? No, just the ocean. Why?" I told him everything. The backpack, the dry contents, the voice calling my name. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "The pack's in your truck?" he asked. I nodded and gestured to the back seat. He walked around, opened my rear door, and looked at the backpack. I saw his expression change. "Jesus," he muttered. "It really is dry. Told you." He carefully lifted the pack out and set it on the tailgate of his truck. He went through the contents, methodically checking everything just like I had. When he found the map, he studied it for a long time. "You see the writing?" I asked. "Yeah. I'm coming." "What do you think it means?" "I don't know. But that voice I heard, it said the same thing." Jonas looked at me. "You sure you heard a voice? This fog can play tricks on you. Sound carries weird. Maybe it was a sea lion or... It said my name, Jonas. It called me Morgan. How does a sea lion know my name?" He didn't have an answer for that. We stood there in the parking lot as the fog slowly started to lift. The sun was coming up properly now, turning the gray world into shades of silver and gold. The beach was becoming visible again. Empty sand stretching north and south. No one there. Nothing but our footprints. "We need to check the fishing reports," Jonas said finally. "If Holden went into the water 2 days ago, we need to know the currents, the tides, where his body should have drifted." "You think he's dead?" Jonas gave me a look. "He's been missing for 2 days in the Pacific. Yeah, I think he's dead. Question is, how did his pack end up here dry as a bone?" We drove to the ranger station in Waltport. The building was a small cedar-sided structure that looked like it had been there since the 70s. Inside was a cramped office with filing cabinets, maps, and a radio setup that belonged in a museum. Jonas booted up the ancient computer and started pulling up data. Holden was last seen at Ona Beach on October 12th around 4 p.m., he said, reading from the missing persons report. His car was still in the parking lot the next morning. Keys inside. No sign of forced entry or struggle. Coast Guard searched a 5-mile radius. Nothing. What about his family? Did anyone report him missing? Says here his ex-wife filed the report. They'd been divorced for 3 years but stayed in touch. She said he'd been acting strange lately, withdrawn. Said he'd become obsessed with the ocean, with the coast. Obsessed how? Jonas scrolled through more information. She said he'd drive up here every weekend. Would spend hours just walking the beaches, staring at the water. She thought he was depressed, thought maybe he was suicidal. I thought about the map, the careful annotations, the red ink. Did she say anything else? Anything about why he came here specifically? Let me check. Jonas clicked through more screens. Here, she mentioned that he'd been having dreams, said the ocean was calling to him, that he needed to go back. Go back to what? Doesn't say. Jonas leaned back in his chair. But there's a note here from the investigating officer. Says Holden's behavior matched several other missing persons cases over the years. People who became fixated on the coast, who claimed to hear voices or feel drawn to specific locations. Most of them were never found. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. How many cases are we talking about? At least 6 in the last 10 years. All along this stretch of coast between Yachats and Newport. All adults between 30 and 50. All last seen near the water. 2 bodies were recovered, the other 4 just vanished. Jesus. Yeah. Jonas closed the laptop. We've got protocols for this. When we find personal effects associated with a missing persons case, we're supposed to log everything. Photo document, then hand it over to the investigating agency. We should do that, I said. But Jonas, that voice, whatever I heard out there, it knew things it shouldn't have known. He looked at me for a long moment. You said it called you Morgan. Yeah. How many people on this coast know your first name? I thought about it. Not many. Most people just call me Tate or Ranger Tate. The other rangers know, some of the locals, but a stranger wouldn't. So either someone out there knows you personally or what? Or something else is going on. He stood up and grabbed his jacket. Come on. I want to go back to where you found the pack, in daylight, see if there's anything we missed. We drove back to the beach. The fog had burned off completely now, revealing a crisp, clear autumn day. The ocean was calm, almost glassy. The kind of day that made you forget how dangerous it could be. We walked out to the spot where I'd found the backpack. I could see my footprints from earlier still visible in the sand. Could see where I'd knelt beside the pack, where I'd run back toward the parking lot. But there was something else. More footprints. They started right at the waterline. Bare feet, adult-sized. They walked straight up the beach to where the backpack had been sitting. Then they stopped. Just stopped. Like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. Jonas knelt down and examined them closely. These are fresh, he said. Made within the last few hours. While I was here, I said quietly. Yeah. We followed the footprints back toward the water. They were evenly spaced. Not rushed, not dragging. Just a normal walking pace, but they only went one direction. From the water to where the pack had been. There were no prints going back. At the waterline, Jonas stopped. The last footprint was half in the water, half on wet sand. We both stared at it. Okay, he said after a minute. I don't like this. Yeah. Someone came out of the ocean, walked up the beach, set down the backpack, then vanished. That's what it looks like. But that's impossible. I know. We stood there looking at the ocean. It looked so peaceful, so innocent. The waves rolled in gentle and regular. Seabirds called overhead. The sun sparkled on the water. It was beautiful, and it was lying. We need to talk to the ex-wife, Jonas said. Find out more about Holden, about these dreams he was having. We went back to the station and Jonas made some calls. It took about an hour, but he finally got through to Sarah Holden. He put her on speaker. Mrs. Holden, this is Jonas Mercer with Oregon Parks and Recreation. I'm calling about your ex-husband Marcus. We found some of his belongings on the beach this morning. There was a sharp intake of breath. You found him? No, ma'am, just his backpack. But we'd like to ask you some questions if that's all right. Of course, anything. The report mentions that Marcus had been acting strangely before he disappeared, that he was having dreams about the ocean. Can you tell us more about that? She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was shaky. It started about 6 months ago. He called me one night. We didn't usually talk much after the divorce, but he sounded scared. He said he'd been having the same dream every night for a week. Said he was drowning, that the water was pulling him down and he couldn't fight it. But in the dream, he wasn't scared. He said it felt like coming home. Jonas and I exchanged a look. Did he say anything else about these dreams? Jonas asked. He said someone was calling to him, a voice in the water. He couldn't make out the words, but he knew it was important. Knew he needed to listen. She paused. I told him to see a therapist. Thought maybe he was having some kind of breakdown. but he wouldn't go, just kept driving up to the coast every weekend. He'd come back from those trips and he'd seem different, calmer, but also more distant, like part of him was still there at the beach. Did he ever mention specific locations, places he felt drawn to? He had a whole map, marked up with all these spots along the coast. He said they were calling points, places where the boundary was thin. I didn't understand what he meant. Jonas looked at me. Mrs. Holden, did Marcus ever mention anyone else who might have experienced something similar? Any friends or other people he'd met? No, but he did mention finding something online, some kind of forum or message board. People talking about hearing voices from the ocean, about feeling drawn to specific places. He said there were dozens of posts, maybe hundreds, all describing the same thing. Do you remember the name of the forum? No, I'm sorry. I should have paid more attention. I thought he was just going through something. Depression, maybe. I never thought... Her voice broke. Is he dead? Please, just tell me. Jonas's expression softened. We don't know, ma'am, but we're doing everything we can to find out what happened. After we hung up, Jonas pulled up a browser and started searching. It didn't take long to find what we were looking for. A subreddit called Armgeester Calling Tides. The description read, "For those who hear the ocean calling." We scrolled through the posts. There were hundreds of them, going back years. People from all over the world describing the same experience. Dreams of drowning. Voices in the water. The feeling of being pulled toward the sea. Most of the posts were from people who lived near coastlines. Many mentioned specific locations, and when Jonas pulled up a map and started plotting the locations mentioned in the posts, a pattern emerged. They all clustered around certain spots, areas where unusual numbers of drownings had occurred, where people had gone missing, where the ocean seemed hungrier than it should be, and the Oregon coast between Yachts and Newport lit up like a Christmas tree. Jesus Christ, Jonas muttered. Look at this. I leaned closer. There were at least 30 posts specifically mentioning our stretch of coastline. People describing dreams, voices, the urge to walk into the water. Some of the posts were recent, some were years old, but they all described the same thing. We need to contact the Coast Guard, I said, and the Sheriff's Department. This is bigger than we thought. Jonas nodded, but he looked troubled. Morgan, what did that voice sound like? The one you heard this morning? I thought back, tried to remember. It sounded wrong, like someone trying to imitate a human voice but not quite getting it right. And it kept repeating things, like a recording, like it was learning, Jonas said quietly. What? Like it was learning how to sound human. Practicing. We looked at each other. Neither of us wanted to say what we were both thinking. That whatever was out there in the ocean, whatever had taken Marcus Holden and all those other people, it wasn't done. It was still hunting, still calling, still trying to lure more people into the water. And now it knew my name. The next 48 hours were some of the strangest of my life. Jonas contacted the Coast Guard and the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. We handed over Marcus Holden's backpack as evidence. We filed detailed reports about everything we'd found and heard. And then we waited. The official response was about what you'd expect. Concern, but skepticism. The Coast Guard agreed to conduct another search of the area. The Sheriff's Department added our findings to their missing persons file. But when Jonas mentioned the voice I'd heard and the impossible dryness of the backpack, I could practically hear the doubt through the phone. Fog does weird things to sound, the Coast Guard liaison told us. And as for the pack being dry, maybe it was stored somewhere protected. Maybe it washed up during the last high tide and had time to dry out. But Jonas and I both knew that didn't make sense. The tide charts didn't support it. The weather data didn't support it, and the footprints certainly didn't support it. Something had walked out of that ocean, something that left Marcus Holden's backpack sitting on the beach like bait. After the official channels proved unhelpful, Jonas and I decided to do our own digging. We started with the historical records. The Lincoln County Library had archives going back to the 1880s, when the first white settlers arrived in the area. We spent hours going through old newspapers and maritime logs looking for any mention of unusual drownings or disappearances. What we found was disturbing. The pattern went back decades, maybe longer. Every few years, someone would vanish along this particular stretch of coastline. Sometimes it was a fisherman who went out in his boat and never came back. Sometimes it was a tourist who went for a walk on the beach. Sometimes it was a local who should have known better. But they all had one thing in common. They'd been alone when they disappeared. And in several cases, witnesses reported that the person had been acting strangely beforehand, walking toward the water in a daze, talking to themselves. One account from 1952 described a woman who waded fully clothed into the surf while singing. Her body washed up 3 days later, 12 miles down the coast. This has been happening for at least 70 years, Jonas said. He was sitting across from me at one of the library's reading tables surrounded by old newspapers and ledgers. Probably longer, but the records get spotty before the 1940s. Every few years, I said, looking at the timeline we'd been building. Like clockwork, 3 to 5 people per decade. Until recently. Jonas tapped a more recent newspaper article. Last 10 years we've had 6 disappearances. 7 counting Holden. The frequency is increasing. Why? He shook his head. I don't know. But I found something else. Something that might be relevant. He slid a photocopy across the table. It was from a maritime log dated 1923. The entry was written in careful cursive. April 19, 1923. Clear skies, calm seas, encountered disturbance 2 miles west of Seal Rock. Water appeared to be boiling. Crew reported hearing sounds like voices singing beneath the surface. Investigated, but found nothing. Note: local Siletz tribesmen aboard as guide became agitated. Insisted we leave the area immediately. Claimed the water was hungry. Recommend avoiding these coordinates in future. Hungry, I said. That's an interesting word choice. I asked around, Jonas said. Talked to some of the Siletz people who still live in the area. Most wouldn't talk about it. Said it was bad luck to speak of certain things, but one elder finally opened up a little. Said there are old stories about these waters, about something that lives in the deep places. Something that doesn't belong here but can't leave. What kind of something? He wouldn't say, just that it's always been there, that it gets lonely, that it calls to people. Calls to people, I repeated, like the voices. Yeah. We sat in silence for a while. The library was nearly empty. Just us and a couple of college students studying in the far corner. Outside the windows, I could see the gray sky darkening. Another storm was rolling in. I could hear the first drops of rain beginning to patter against the glass. Jonas, what are we dealing with here? I asked quietly. What is this thing? He looked at me with tired eyes. I don't know, Morgan, but I think it's been here a long time, and I think it's hungry. That night I went home to my small rental house in Newport. It was a 1-bedroom place about 6 blocks from the waterfront. I'd lived there for 5 years. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. Usually I found it cozy, comfortable. But that night it felt exposed, vulnerable. I kept thinking about the voice on the beach, about how it had known my name, about how it had repeated the words from Marcus Holden's map. I'm coming. I triple-checked all my locks, closed all my curtains, turned on every light. Then I sat on my couch with my service weapon on the coffee table and tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, that there was a rational explanation for everything, that I was letting my imagination run wild. I almost succeeded. Then I heard the tap, tap, tap on my window. I froze. The sound came again, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone knocking with their fingernails. I looked at the window. The curtains were closed. I couldn't see what was on the other side. The tapping continued. Tap, tap, tap. Slowly, I stood up, grabbed my weapon, moved toward the window. My heart was hammering in my chest. The tapping stopped. I stood there for a long moment listening. Nothing. Just the rain on the roof, the distant sound of traffic. Then a voice, muffled by the glass and the curtain but unmistakable. "Morgan." I didn't move, didn't breathe. "Morgan, let me in. It's cold out here." That wasn't possible. My house was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape. Nothing anyone could stand on to reach my window. You'd need a ladder or wings. "I came back for you, Morgan. Like I promised, I'm coming." That voice, it was the same one from the beach. That not quite right quality. Like someone reading from a script they didn't understand. "Go away," I said. My voice came out shakier than I wanted. "Leave me alone." "But you wanted to know. You wanted to understand." "I can show you, Morgan. I can show you where they all went, where Marcus went, where Sarah went, where all the lost ones went. They're waiting. They want you to come home." "I don't know what you are," I said, "but you need to leave. Now." Silence. Then the tapping again. Faster this time. More insistent. Tap, 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 multiple points hitting the glass simultaneously, like dozens of fingers drumming against the window. I backed away, pulled out my phone and dialed Jonas. He answered on the second ring. "It's here," I said. "At my house. It followed me." "What? Morgan, what are you talking about?" "The voice. It's outside my window. It's saying my name. It knows where I live. I'm on my way. Lock everything and don't go near the windows." He hung up. I stood in the middle of my living room holding my weapon and listening to that horrible tapping. It went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 minutes. Then it stopped. Just like that. Silence. When Jonas arrived 15 minutes later, I'd already checked outside from a different window. There was nothing there. No one on the street, no ladder, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Except for one thing, on my window, where the tapping had been, there were marks, dozens of them. Small, wet handprints covering the glass. But they weren't normal handprints, they were webbed. The fingers too long, the spacing all wrong. Jonas took photos with his phone. Then we went outside and he climbed up on his truck to get a closer look. The prints were on the outside of the glass, about 15 feet above the ground. No way anyone could have reached them without equipment. "Jesus," he muttered, climbing back down. "What the hell made those?" "I don't know, but it spoke to me, used my name. Said it wanted to show me where everyone went." Jonas looked at me hard. "Morgan, I think you need to leave. Take some time off. Get away from the coast for a while." "I'm not running. This isn't running, this is survival. Whatever this thing is, it's fixated on you now. First, it called you on the beach. Now it's at your house. It's escalating." "All the more reason to stay," I said. "If it wants me, then maybe I can use that. Maybe I can figure out what it wants. Or maybe it drowns you like all the others. Then you'll know for sure that I'm right." He didn't like it, but he could see I wasn't going to budge. We went back inside, and he stayed on my couch that night. Both of us dozed fitfully. Every small sound made us jump, but nothing else happened. The windows stayed quiet. The house stayed secure. In the morning, Jonas made coffee while I took a shower. When I came out, he was on his laptop looking grim. "Another one," he said without preamble. "Another what?" "Missing person. Woman named Jennifer Katz, age 37, tourist from Seattle. Checked into the Adobe Motel in Yakats 3 days ago. Her room key was turned in this morning, but she never checked out. Staff went to check on her and found the room empty. Bed made. Belongings still there, but no sign of her. Shit. It gets worse. They found her phone on the beach, down near Yakat's Ocean Road State Natural Site. In Morgan, the phone was dry, just like Holden's backpack. I felt my stomach drop. It's doing it again. Yeah, Sheriff's Department is treating it as a missing persons case, but between you and me, I don't think they're taking it seriously enough. They think she just wandered off, maybe got disoriented, maybe fell into the water. We need to go there, I said, to where they found the phone. I was hoping you'd say that. We drove south to Yakats. It took about 40 minutes. The town was small, maybe 700 permanent residents swelling to a few thousand during tourist season. It sat right on the coast with the Highway 101 running through the middle. The Adobe Motel where Jennifer Katz had been staying was a small place with about 20 rooms, classic motor lodge style. We didn't stop there, just drove straight to the beach. Yakat's Ocean Road State Natural Site is a rocky stretch of coastline with dramatic views. Lots of tide pools, lots of places where someone could slip and fall and get swept out to sea. The parking area was nearly empty, just one other car. A sheriff's deputy stood near the trailhead talking on his radio. Jonas parked, and we walked over. He badged the deputy and explained we were following up on some related cases. The deputy looked young, maybe mid-20s. He seemed relieved to have someone else there. "You guys hear about the weird stuff?" he asked. "Weird how?" Jonas said. "The phone, the one we found on the beach. It was completely dry, no water damage at all, but the tide's been up and down twice since the woman was last seen. And get this, the phone had photos on it. Recent ones, from this morning. But she's been missing since yesterday." Jonas and I exchanged looks. "Can we see the photos?" I asked. The deputy hesitated. "I shouldn't really, but hell, maybe you'll make sense of it." He pulled out his own phone and showed us pictures he'd taken of Jennifer Katz's phone screen. The photos made my skin crawl. They showed the beach. This beach. But from a strange angle, low to the ground, almost like someone lying down had taken them. The timestamps showed 6:47 a.m., just a few hours ago. And in each photo, looking closer, you could see something. Footprints. Dozens of them. Leading from the water to where the phone was found, just like the prints we'd found near Marcus Holden's backpack. "Someone walked out of the ocean," the deputy said quietly, "with her phone and left it here. Why would someone do that?" "What do you think happened to her?" Jonas asked. The deputy shrugged. "Official theory is she went for a walk, fell, hit her head, and drowned. Maybe the phone washed up separately, but between you and me, this whole thing feels wrong. People don't just vanish like this." "They do on this coast," I said softly. "More often than you'd think." We walked down to the beach. The area where the phone had been found was marked with evidence tape. We stood there looking at the ocean. The water was rough today, whitecaps on every wave. The wind was cold and smelled like rain. "Morgan," Jonas said, "you ever think about why it's doing this? Leaving the belongings where we can find them?" "Bait," I said. "It's trying to draw people in, us, investigators, anyone who comes looking." "That's what I think too, which means we're walking right into its trap. So, what do? "We spring the trap," he said. "On our terms." He explained his plan. It was risky, probably stupid, but it might be the only way to get answers. That night, we went back to the beach where I'd found Marcus Holden's backpack. We came prepared. Emergency flares, whistles, radios. Jonas had even borrowed a GoPro camera to document whatever might happen. We set up near the waterline just before sunset. Then we waited. The fog rolled in right on schedule, thick and cloying. Within 20 minutes, we couldn't see more than 15 feet in any direction. The waves sounded distant and muffled. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the air. "You sure about this?" I asked Jonas. He was standing next to me, scanning the fog with his flashlight. "No," he admitted. "But I'm tired of this thing hunting us. Time we did some hunting of our own." We didn't have to wait long. The voice started around 8 p.m., distant at first, barely audible over the sound of the waves, then closer, always closer. "Morgan," it called. "Jonas, we've been waiting for you. We're so glad you came back." "Show yourself," Jonas called out. His hand was on his weapon. "Come out where we can see you." "But we are out," the voice said. It sounded amused now, like this was all a game. "We're all around you. Can't you see us? Can't you see all the lost ones?" And then through the fog I saw them. Shapes, moving in the gray. Human-shaped, but wrong. Too fluid in their movements. Too synchronized. They emerged from the fog in a loose circle around us. 7 of them, maybe more. It was hard to tell in the murk. They wore clothes, normal clothes, jeans and jackets and hiking boots. But everything was soaked through, dripping. And their skin had that waterlogged look, pale and swollen. One of them was Marcus Holden. I recognized him from his driver's license photo. He stood about 10 feet from us, looking at us with eyes that didn't blink, didn't seem to see. Next to him was a woman in a Patagonia jacket, Jennifer Katz. She'd only been missing for 4 days, but she looked like she'd been in the water for weeks. "Jesus Christ," Jonas whispered. He raised his flashlight. The beam passed over the figures. They didn't react, didn't flinch, just stood there dripping and silent. "You wanted to know," one of them said. A young man in a University of Oregon hoodie. I didn't recognize him. "So we'll show you. We'll take you down to where it waits, where it's always waited. It's been so lonely, it just wants company, it just wants to come home." "Stay back," I said. My voice was shaking, but I kept my weapon raised. "Don't come any closer." They didn't listen. They moved forward as one, slow and deliberate. Their feet made sucking sounds in the wet sand. Water poured off them. From their clothes, from their hair, from their open mouths. Jonas fired a flare into the air. The bright red light turned the fog the color of blood. For just a moment I could see them clearly. See the barnacles growing on their skin. See the kelp tangled in their hair. See the absolute emptiness in their eyes. Then the light faded and they were on us. Cold hands grabbed my arms, my jacket, my hair. They were strong, impossibly strong. They dragged me toward the water. I fought, kicked, screamed, but there were too many of them. I could hear Jonas shouting, the sound of a struggle. Then a scream cut short. The water hit me like a wall of ice. It filled my mouth, my nose, my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think. There was only the cold and the dark and the terrible pulling sensation dragging me down, down, down into the deep. And then, through the dark, I saw something. A shape, vast and ancient, rising from the depths. It had too many arms, too many mouths. It was beautiful and terrible and wrong. And as it opened those mouths, I heard them all singing. All the lost ones. All the drowned. Singing a song that had no words, but promised peace and rest, and the end of everything. The song got louder, closer. The thing reached for me with appendages that were and weren't tentacles. That moved through the water like it was air. That wrapped around my chest and squeezed, and I knew this was it. This was how I died. Dragged into the deep by something that shouldn't exist. Then I felt another hand, human, warm, grabbing mine, pulling me up, fighting the current and the cold and that terrible singing. I held on with everything I had left. My vision was going dark, my lungs were burning. But I held on. We broke the surface together, Jonas and me. He dragged me onto the sand, and I coughed up what felt like half the ocean. My whole body was shaking. I couldn't feel my fingers or toes, but I was alive. The fog was clearing. The figures were gone, vanished back into the water. The beach was empty except for us. "Did you?" I gasped. "Did you see it?" Jonas nodded. His face was white. "Yeah, I saw it." "What the hell was that thing?" "I don't know," he said. "But I don't think we're supposed to know. I don't think humans were ever meant to see that." We lay there on the cold sand for a long time, just breathing, just being alive. Eventually, we had enough strength to stand and make our way back to Jonas's truck. My phone was gone, lost in the water. The GoPro camera, too. We had no evidence, nothing but our own memories of what we'd seen. "No one's going to believe us," I said as we drove back toward Newport. "I know," Jonas replied. "But we know. That's enough." "Is it? People are still going missing. That thing is still down there, still calling to them, still drowning them. What do you want us to do, Morgan? We can't fight that. We barely survived tonight. If we go public with this, they'll think we're crazy. They'll pull our badges and commit us." He was right. I knew he was right, but it didn't make me feel any better. We drove in silence for a while. Then Jonas said something that made my blood run cold. "Morgan, it called us by name. Before we even got to the beach. Before it should have known we were there. It was waiting for us. I know. Which means it wanted us to see. Wanted us to know. Why? I think it's spreading," Jonas said quietly. "I think whatever that thing is, it's getting stronger. More active. And I think it wants the word to get out, wants people to know, because knowledge breeds curiosity. And curiosity brings people to the water, brings them where it can reach them. So what do? We don't talk about this. We don't write about it. We don't tell anyone what we saw. We let the official investigation conclude that Holden and Katz and all the others drowned. Accidental deaths, case closed. And we hope that's enough to keep people away. That's not justice. No, he agreed. But it might be survival. That was 3 months ago, November, December, January. I've been working the same stretch of coastline this whole time. Same patrols, same beaches, same ocean. But everything feels different now. Every time I walk out on the sand, I wonder if today's the day it comes back for me. Every time I hear the waves, I listen for voices underneath. Every time the fog rolls in, I check over my shoulder. Jonas requested a transfer. He's working inland now, Forest Service territory up in the Cascades. He didn't say it was because of what happened that night, but we both knew. Some things you can't unsee, some things you can't unhear. And once you know what's waiting in the water, it's hard to look at the ocean the same way. I think about leaving too, finding a Park Service job somewhere landlocked. Kansas, maybe. Nebraska. Somewhere flat and boring where the most dangerous thing is a thunderstorm. But every time I start looking at job postings, something stops me. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe I just can't stand the idea of letting that thing win. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe part of me is still listening to that song. The one I heard down in the dark. The one that promised peace and rest in the end of everything. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my house, I can still hear it. Faint, distant, like a radio station not quite tuned in. And I have to fight the urge to go to the window, to open it, to follow that sound back to where it's calling from. I'm writing this all down because I think people need to know, not the official reports or the sanitized versions in the newspapers. The truth. What really happened to Marcus Holden and Jennifer Katz and all the others. What's still waiting out there in the deep places where the water meets the dark. The official investigation concluded exactly as Jonas predicted. Marcus Holden and Jennifer Katz were declared accidental drownings. Their bodies were never recovered. The cases were closed. Life went on for everyone except their families who still wonder what really happened. Who still hope that maybe somehow their loved ones are out there somewhere, alive. But I know better. I saw where they went. I saw what has them now, and I know they're never coming back. Not really. The things that walked out of the fog that night weren't Marcus or Jennifer or any of the others. They were puppets, copies. Something wearing their faces and their clothes but hollow inside. Emptied out and filled with salt water and singing. In the weeks after that night, I did more research, went deeper than Jonas and I had gone before. I found records of similar incidents going back centuries, not just on the Oregon coast but all over the world. Anywhere the ocean meets the land, anywhere people go missing in the water, there are stories, legends, warnings passed down through generations. The Pacific Northwest tribes have stories about Basket Woman who lives in the sea and steals people away. The Japanese have tales of Ningyo, the fish people who drag swimmers into the depths. The Celtic peoples spoke of Selkies and Marrows. Different names, different cultures, but always the same theme, something in the water that takes human form, that calls to people, that won't let them go. I found an account from a missionary in the 1850s who worked with the Silets people. He wrote about their belief in what they called the hungry tide, a presence in the ocean that grew stronger during certain moon phases. That could make itself heard by those who were lonely or lost, or seeking something they couldn't name. The missionary dismissed it as superstition, but he noted that the Silets people never swam in the ocean, never went out in boats after dark, and always left offerings on the beach at the full moon. Food, shells, sometimes small, carved figures, to keep the hungry tide satisfied. I wondered if that's what Marcus Holden had been doing, making offerings, trying to appease something he knew was there but didn't understand. I wondered if that's why he kept coming back, weekend after weekend, walking those beaches, staring at the water, listening for something only he could hear. I wondered if I was starting to do the same thing. The strange events didn't stop after that night in November. They got worse, or maybe I just started noticing them more, the patterns, the signs. In December, a couple from Portland reported seeing someone swimming in the ocean near Otter Crest at midnight. They said the person was swimming far from shore, moving fast, too fast. They called 911, but by the time help arrived, there was nothing there. No swimmer. No signs anyone had been in the water. The couple insisted they knew what they'd seen. The official report labeled it a possible hallucination. Too much wine with dinner. In January, a fisherman found a child's shoe floating in his crab trap 3 miles offshore. The shoe was brand new, no signs of wear, and it was completely dry inside, like it had never touched water. No missing children were reported in the area. No one ever came forward to claim it. The fisherman threw it back into the ocean, said it gave him the creeps. Last week, I found something on my morning patrol. Another backpack sitting on the beach near Seal Rock, right where I'd found Marcus Holden's pack 3 months earlier. This one belonged to a hiker named David Brennan, age 51. From Seattle. He'd been reported missing 4 days earlier, last seen at the Devil's Punch Bowl State Natural Area. The backpack was dry, perfectly organized, and inside I found a journal. The last entry was dated the day he disappeared. It said, "I can hear it calling. I know I shouldn't go, I know what it wants, but I'm so tired of fighting, so tired of being afraid. Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe they were right. Maybe it's like coming home." I read that entry 3 times, trying to understand. Then I realized something that made my hand shake. The handwriting changed partway through. Started out neat and controlled. By the end, it was barely legible. Shaky. Like someone else had taken over. Like something else was guiding his hand. I checked the subreddit, r Calling Tides. David Brennan had been an active poster. His last post was titled, "I think I'm finally ready." The comments were full of people encouraging him, telling him it was beautiful, telling him not to be afraid, telling him to follow the voice and everything would be clear. I looked at the usernames of the people commenting, cross-referenced them with the missing persons database. 12 of them matched names of people who'd drowned or disappeared along the Pacific coast in the last 5 years. They were still posting, still active, still encouraging others to listen to the voices, to follow the calling. That's when I understood. It wasn't just taking people, it was using them, their accounts, their words, their faces. Everything it learned from the ones it caught it used to lure more. It was crowdsourcing its hunting strategy, getting smarter, more efficient, more human. And it was working. The number of disappearances along the Oregon coast has tripled in the last year. Most are still being ruled as accidents, drownings, people getting swept away by sneaker waves. But I know better. I've seen the pattern. I've seen the dry belongings left on the beach. I've seen the footprints walking out of the water. I've tried to warn people. Tried to get the word out. But every time I do, I sound crazy. The one time I went to a reporter with my story, she listened politely, then filed it under local color. Human interest. The paranoid park ranger who thinks the ocean is alive. It ran as a fluff piece in the weekly paper. Got a few laughs. No one took it seriously. Maybe that's what it wants. To be dismissed. To hide in plain sight. To keep hunting while everyone looks the other way. I still work my patrol. Still walk the beaches every morning. But I've started carrying things. Salt, iron nails, symbols carved from driftwood. Things the old stories say might offer protection. I don't know if they work. Don't know if anything works against something that old and patient and hungry, but it makes me feel better. Like I'm doing something. Last night I had the dream again. The one I've been having since November. I'm underwater, sinking. The light from the surface getting dimmer. Dimmer. Gone. And something's rising from below. Something vast. Something with too many arms and too many mouths. And it's singing. That same song. The one that promises peace and rest and the end of everything. But this time was different. This time I wasn't afraid. This time, part of me wanted to stop fighting, to let go, to sink down into the dark and join all the others, to become part of that chorus singing beneath the waves. I woke up gasping. My sheets were soaked, not with sweat, with salt water, cold Pacific Ocean water, dripping from my hair, my skin, my clothes. The whole room smelled like kelp and brine. And on my nightstand was something that shouldn't have been there. A conch shell, the kind you find on tropical beaches. Not Oregon beaches, not this far north. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was still wet, still cold. And when I held it to my ear, I didn't hear the ocean. I heard voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all calling my name, all telling me to come home, all promising that it wouldn't hurt, that I'd be with them, that I'd never be alone again. I threw the shell across the room. It shattered against the wall, but even broken, the voices continued. Softer now, but still there, still calling. That was this morning, about 6 hours ago. I've been sitting here at my kitchen table writing this ever since. Trying to get it all down while I still can, while I'm still me, because I can feel it. The pull, the calling, it's getting stronger, harder to resist. I know what's going to happen. I've seen it happen to others. I've watched it happen, the way they start to hear voices, the way they get drawn to the water, the way they walk into the surf and don't come back, and then their belongings show up on the beach, dry and organized, and the cycle continues. I thought I was different, thought I was strong enough to resist, but I'm not. No one is. Once it knows your name, once it's touched you, once you've heard that song, it's only a matter of time. So I'm writing this as a warning. If you're reading this, if you live near the ocean, if you spend time on the beaches, listen to me. If you hear voices in the water, if you find belongings that shouldn't be dry, if you see footprints walking out of the surf, run. Don't investigate, don't try to understand. Don't think you're special or strong or smart enough to resist, because you're not. None of us are. And if you hear my name on the wind, if you see my face in the fog, if you find my gear sitting on a beach somewhere bone dry and perfectly organized, don't go looking for me. Don't try to solve the mystery. Just remember that I tried to warn you. The ocean is hungry. It's always been hungry, and it's never satisfied. I can hear it now, outside my window, the sound of waves. But I'm 6 blocks from the beach, 6 blocks from the water. That shouldn't be possible, but I can hear it. And under the sound of the waves, I can hear the voices. All of them, Marcus, Jennifer, David, all the others. And now they're singing my name. Morgan, Morgan, Morgan. Come home, come home, come home. I'm going to finish writing this. Then I'm going to post it online. Everywhere I can think of. Every forum. Every social media platform. Every message board. Maybe someone will listen. Maybe someone will believe. Maybe I can save at least one person from making the same mistakes I did. Or maybe it's already too late. Maybe by the time anyone reads this, I'll be gone. Another missing person. Another unsolved case. Another name added to the list of people who went to the beach and never came back. If that happens, if you hear about a park ranger named Morgan Tate who disappeared somewhere on the Oregon coast, if you see my picture in the news, if you wonder what really happened to me, just remember this story. Remember what I saw, what I learned, what's waiting out there in the deep places. And whatever you do, don't come looking for me. Because if you do, if you walk those beaches, if you follow those footprints, if you try to solve the mystery, you'll end up just like me, just like Marcus, just like all the others. You'll hear the calling, you'll hear the song, and eventually, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, you'll walk into the water, and you'll never walk back out. The voices are getting louder now. I can barely hear myself think. They're at my door. I can hear the doorknob turning. But I locked it. I know I locked it. The metal is cold. So cold. Like it's been underwater for 1,000 years. I need to go now. Need to post this. Need to make sure someone knows, someone remembers, that this wasn't just another accident, another random drowning, that there's something out there, something old and patient and hungry, something that takes people and makes them into something else, something that wears their faces and their clothes and speaks with their voices, but hollow inside, emptied out and filled with darkness and salt water and song. If you're reading this, if you made it this far, please, please listen. Stay away from the Oregon coast. Stay away from the beaches between Yucats and Newport. Stay away from anywhere the water meets the dark. Because the ocean remembers. The ocean calls, and the ocean never lets go. My name is Morgan Tate. I'm a park ranger with Oregon Parks and Recreation. And this is my warning. Don't follow me. Don't look for me. Don't try to understand. Just run. Before it's too late. Before you hear your name in the waves. Before you find yourself walking toward the water. Before you... My name is Aubrey Langston, and I've worked as a park ranger on the Oregon coast for 6 years. People ask me all the time what the hardest part of the job is. They expect me to say it's the weather, or the isolation, or dealing with difficult tourists. But the truth is the hardest part is the fog. Not because it's dangerous, though it is. Not because it makes visibility impossible, though it does. But because fog has a way of making you question reality. Of making you see and hear things that shouldn't be there. Of turning a familiar stretch of coastline into something alien and unknowable. This story is about one of those times. About a night when the fog rolled in thick and heavy. About voices I heard that couldn't have been there. And about what we found when the fog finally lifted. I work the northern section of the Siuslaw National Forest where it meets the Pacific Ocean. It's a remote area, beautiful but brutal. The forest comes right down to the cliffs, and the cliffs drop straight into the ocean. There are a few accessible beaches, but most of the coastline is rocky and dangerous. We get hikers and campers during the summer months, but come fall and winter it's mostly empty. Just us rangers and the occasional hardcore outdoor enthusiast who doesn't mind the cold and the rain. The incident I'm going to tell you about happened in late February. Winter on the Oregon coast is not like winter in other places. We don't get much snow. What we get is rain. Endless cold rain. And wind that comes straight off the Pacific with nothing to stop it. And fog. God, the fog. It can roll in so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face. Can blanket the entire coast for days at a time. And when it does, the whole world becomes gray and muffled and strange. I was on night patrol. We do them regularly, especially in winter. Checking for illegal campfires, making sure no one's gotten themselves into trouble. Responding to emergency calls if they come in. My shift started at 6 p.m. and was supposed to run until 2 a.m. I was partnered that night with Seth Rowan. Seth was new to the coast. He'd transferred up from Southern California about 3 months earlier. Still getting used to how different the Oregon coast was from the beaches down south. Still learning that the Pacific up here wasn't your friend. We met at the ranger station just as the sun was setting. The forecast called for heavy fog overnight. No surprise there. February is fog season. Seth had brought coffee in a thermos and some granola bars. I had my standard gear. Flashlight, radio, emergency kit, warmth layers. We loaded up my truck and headed out. "How thick do you think it'll get?" Seth asked, as we drove north on Highway 101. "Pretty thick," I said. "Visibility's already dropping. Give it another hour and we'll be lucky to see 10 feet. "Great," he muttered. "Nothing like wandering around in the dark and the fog on the edge of a cliff." "That's why you get paid the big bucks," I said with a smile. He laughed, but I could tell he was nervous. Seth was a good ranger. Competent. Careful. But the coast made him uneasy. I understood. It took time to adjust to this place. To accept that nature here didn't care about you. That one wrong step could send you tumbling down a 100-foot cliff. That the ocean would kill you given half a chance. We drove for about 20 minutes until we reached the trailhead for Hesed ahead. Not the lighthouse itself, but the network of trails that ran along the cliffs to the north. This was one of our regular patrol areas. Popular with hikers during the day, empty at night. We parked and got out. The fog was already rolling in. I could see it streaming over the cliff tops like something alive. Gray tendrils reaching through the trees. The temperature had dropped, maybe 40 degrees. The wind was picking up. I could hear the ocean far below. The constant crash and hiss of waves on rocks. "All right," I said, pulling on my jacket. "We'll do the coastal loop, check the campsites. Make sure no one's out here who shouldn't be. Stay close. If we get separated in this fog, we'll have a hell of a time finding each other." Seth nodded and clicked on his flashlight. We started down the trail. The path was narrow and rocky. It wound through dense coastal forest. Shore pine and Sitka spruce, salal bushes. Everything was wet from the constant mist. Our boots squelched on the muddy ground. The fog got thicker as we descended. Within 10 minutes, we were completely enveloped. The beam from my flashlight just got swallowed by the gray. I could barely see Seth, even though he was walking right beside me. We hiked in silence for maybe 15 minutes. The only sounds were our footsteps, and our breathing, and the distant ocean. Then the trail opened up, and we emerged onto a rocky overlook. Below us was a small beach, maybe 100 yards of sand and stone. Above us, the cliff face rose another 50 feet, and all around us was fog, thick, impenetrable fog. "Jesus," Seth said quietly. "Can't see anything." "Yeah, this is about as bad as it gets." I checked my GPS. "There's a campsite about a quarter-mile ahead, down on the beach. We should check it, make sure no one's camping illegally." We found the path that led down to the beach. It was steep and slippery. We had to use the rope handholds that had been installed along the worst sections. My hands were cold. My face was wet from the fog. I could taste salt in the air. Finally, we reached the bottom and stepped onto the sand. The beach was utterly deserted. No tents, no campfires, no people. Just empty sand disappearing into the fog. The sound of the waves was louder down here, more immediate. I couldn't see the water, but I could hear it, could smell it. That sharp ocean smell mixed with kelp and brine. "Let's check the campsite," I said. "Then we can head back up." We walked along the beach, our flashlights cutting weak yellow circles through the fog. The sand was wet and packed down. The tide was coming in. I could see the high water mark from earlier. All the debris and seaweed left behind. We'd need to be quick. Didn't want to get caught down here when the tide came all the way in. That's when I heard it. Voices. Faint. Muffled by the fog, but definitely voices. Two people having a conversation. I stopped walking. Seth nearly ran into me. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" "Voices. Someone's talking." He listened, then nodded. "Yeah, I hear it too. Where's it coming from?" That was the question. In the fog, sound did weird things. Bounced off rocks, echoed, got distorted. It was impossible to tell where the voices were originating. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Park Ranger Langston. If you're out here, you need to identify yourself." The voices stopped, silence except for the waves. We waited. Then the voices started again, clearer now, closer. Two people, a man and a woman. They were having what sounded like a normal conversation. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was casual, relaxed, like they were chatting over coffee. "Oregon Parks Department," Seth called out. "Please respond." Still nothing. Just those voices, getting closer. Or maybe we were getting closer to them. It was hard to tell. I swept my flashlight in a wide arc. The beam passed through the fog, illuminated nothing but gray. "This is strange," I said quietly. "Yeah, very strange." Seth pulled out his radio. "Should we call for backup?" "Not yet. Let's see if we can find them first. We started walking toward where we thought the voices were coming from, toward the base of the cliffs. The voices continued. That same conversational tone. Not distressed, not calling for help, just talking. I still couldn't make out the words. It was like listening to people talk in another room. You could hear the rhythm and cadence, but not the actual content. We walked for maybe 5 minutes. The voices stayed ahead of us, always just out of reach. Then suddenly they stopped. Complete silence except for the ocean. "Where did they go?" Seth asked. "I don't know." I stopped and listened hard. Nothing. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" No response. We stood there in the fog and the dark, waiting for some sign of the people we'd been hearing. But there was nothing. Just that oppressive silence, that feeling of being watched. Of being alone, but not quite alone. "Maybe it was echo," Seth suggested. "Sound bouncing off the cliffs. Could have been coming from somewhere else entirely." "Maybe," I said. But I didn't believe it. Those voices had been real, had been close. I'd heard them clear as day. "Let's check the campsite," I said. "Then we'll sweep back north, see if we can find where they went." We continued along the beach. The campsite was just ahead. A cleared area with a fire ring and a couple of logs arranged for sitting. As we approached, I noticed something that made me stop cold. Smoke. I could smell smoke. "Seth," I said. "You smell that?" He sniffed the air. "Yeah. Campfire." We moved toward the fire ring, and there, burning low but definitely burning, was a campfire. Fresh wood, still crackling, producing heat and light and smoke. Someone had been here recently, very recently. But where were they? "Hello?" I called out again, louder this time. "Your fire is still burning. We know you're here. Please come out." Nothing. Just the wind and the waves and the crackling fire. Seth knelt down and held his hand over the flames. "This is fresh, maybe lit within the last hour. Wood's still got moisture in it. You can hear it hissing." I looked around, used my flashlight to check the area. There were footprints in the sand. Lots of them. Around the fire ring, leading toward the water. But they didn't lead anywhere else. No prints going up the trail. No prints heading north or south along the beach. Just around the fire and toward the water. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "Someone lit this fire. We heard people talking. But where the hell did they go?" Seth stood up and pulled something from his pack. A thermal imaging camera. The department had issued them to rangers who did night patrols. They weren't great. Old models, finicky. But they worked well enough. "Let me check," he said, turning it on. The screen glowed green as it booted up. Then he swept it slowly across the beach. The fire showed up as a bright white hot spot. The cliffs were cooler, dark green. The water was cold, dark blue. And then he swept it over the area where we were standing. "Aubrey," he said quietly. His voice had changed, gone tight. "What?" "We're the only heat signatures on this beach." "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's no one else here. Just you and me. No other people. No warm bodies. Nothing." "That's impossible. Someone lit that fire. We heard voices. I'm telling you what I'm seeing." He showed me the screen. "Look, that's the fire. That's you. That's me. And that's it. If there were other people down here recently, I'd see residual heat. Footprints warming the sand. Body heat lingering. But there's nothing." I looked at the screen. He was right. Just the 3 heat sources. Fire, me, Seth, nothing else. The beach was empty. "So where did they go?" I asked. "I don't know." We stood there in the fog staring at that impossible fire. Someone had lit it. Someone had been here. But the thermal camera said otherwise, said we were alone. Had been alone the whole time. Maybe they went in the water, Seth suggested. In this weather, in the dark, that's suicide. Then where are they? I didn't have an answer. We checked the entire beach, swept it with the thermal camera, found nothing. No people. No heat signatures, no signs of anyone except the fire still burning in the ring and the footprints in the sand. We need to put this fire out, I said finally. And file a report. Something weird is going on. Seth nodded. We used sand to smother the fire. Then we made our way back up the trail to the overlook. The fog was even thicker now. We could barely see the path. Had to feel our way along. By the time we reached my truck, we were both soaked through and shivering. "What do you think that was?" Seth asked, as we drove back toward the ranger station. "I don't know, but I don't like it. Voices that don't have bodies. A fire that appeared out of nowhere. Footprints that don't lead anywhere." "You think someone's messing with us?" "Who? There's no one out here. You saw the thermal. We were alone. Then what? Ghosts?" I looked at him. "I don't believe in ghosts." "Neither do I. But what else explains it?" I didn't have an answer for that. We drove the rest of the way in silence. When we got back to the station, I filed a detailed report. Mentioned the voices, the fire, the lack of heat signatures. My supervisor read it and frowned. "You sure about all this?" he asked. "Positive. Seth was there, he can confirm." "And the thermal camera showed nothing?" "Nothing, except us and the fire." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Aubrey, this coast plays tricks on people, especially in the fog. Sound does weird things. You probably heard an echo from somewhere else, and the fire could have been from earlier in the day, could have been smoldering, just flared back up when you got close. The wood was fresh," I insisted. "Still hissing, still wet. That fire was lit within the hour. Then someone was down there and left before you arrived. Simple as that. But the footprints only led to the water. And the thermal cameras are old." He cut me off. "They malfunction all the time. Maybe it missed them. Maybe they'd been gone long enough that their heat signature faded." He wasn't listening. Wasn't taking this seriously. I could tell by his tone, by the way he was already turning back to his computer. This was going to get filed and forgotten. "All right," I said. "But if something like this happens again, if it happens again, we'll look into it more thoroughly. But for now, I think you just had a strange night in the fog. Go home. Get some rest. You're back on duty tomorrow evening." I left the office frustrated. Seth was waiting in the parking lot leaning against his truck. "What did he say?" Seth asked. "Said it was probably nothing, that the fog played tricks on us." "You believe that? No? Do you?" He shook his head. "I heard those voices, Aubrey, clear as day. And that fire was fresh. No way it had been smoldering all day." "I know. But without evidence, what can we do?" "I don't know. But I think we should go back, tomorrow night. See if it happens again." I thought about it. Going back to that beach. Back into the fog. Back to where we'd heard those impossible voices. Every instinct told me it was a bad idea. But I also knew Seth was right. We needed to know what was happening. "All right," I said. "Tomorrow night, same time. But we bring more equipment this time. Better cameras, recording devices. If something happens, we document it." Agreed. We went our separate ways. I drove home to my apartment in Florence. It was a small place. 1 bedroom, nothing fancy. But it was warm and dry and mine. I stripped off my wet clothes, took a hot shower, and made myself tea. Then I sat on my couch and tried to process what had happened. Those voices had been real. I was certain of it. Not echoes. Not tricks of the wind. Real human voices having a real conversation. But if they were real, where had the people gone? How had they vanished so completely that even the thermal camera couldn't find them? I pulled out my laptop and started searching, looking for similar incidents. Reports of voices in the fog, unexplained campfires, anything that might give me a clue about what we'd experienced. What I found was disturbing. There were dozens of reports, hundreds maybe, going back years. People all along the Oregon coast reporting the same thing. Voices in the fog, conversations that seemed to come from nowhere, and always the same pattern. The voices would stop when you got close, would disappear, and you'd find yourself alone. Most of the reports were dismissed, written off as auditory hallucinations, misidentified sounds, the fog playing tricks. But there were too many, too consistent, too similar. People from different towns, different years, different backgrounds, all describing the same experience. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. A post on a hiking forum from 2 years ago. A woman describing her experience on that exact same beach where Seth and I had been. She'd been camping there alone, had heard voices in the fog, 2 people talking. She'd called out. The voices stopped. When the fog lifted in the morning, she found a campfire still burning, still warm, but no sign of who had lit it. The comments on her post were mixed. Some people believed her. Others said she'd imagined it. But one comment stood out. It was from someone claiming to be a local fisherman. He wrote, "Old-timers around here have stories about that beach. Say it's cursed. Say people vanish there. Say you can hear the voices of the ones who disappeared. Always in the fog. Always at night. Best to stay away." I read that comment 3 times. Then I scrolled through the rest of the thread looking for more information. But the fisherman never posted again, and the original poster had deleted her account. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark thinking. Cursed beaches. Vanishing people. Voices in the fog. It sounded like campfire stories, urban legends. But I'd heard those voices, had seen that fire. And I knew it wasn't imagination. Something was happening on that beach. Something that couldn't be easily explained. And tomorrow night, Seth and I were going back to find out what. I didn't sleep well that night. Kept waking up. Kept thinking I heard voices outside my window. Kept imagining what we might find on that beach. When morning came, I was exhausted. But I had a shift to work. So I dragged myself out of bed, made strong coffee, and headed to the ranger station. The day passed slowly. I did my usual duties. Checked in with visitors, answered questions about trail conditions, filed paperwork. All the boring, mundane parts of the job. But my mind was elsewhere, thinking about the beach, about the fog, about what we'd heard. Seth called around 3 p.m. "You still want to do this tonight?" he asked. "Yeah, you?" "Yeah, I brought extra equipment. Better thermal camera, audio recorder, GoPro. If something happens, we'll have proof." "Good. Meet me at the station at 6. See you then." I hung up and spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I checked my gear, made sure my batteries were charged, my flashlights working, my radio functioning. Then I went online and did more research, looking for any historical information about that beach, any incidents, any clues. What I found wasn't comforting. That stretch of coastline had a history. In 1983, 2 hikers had vanished there, never found. In 95, a fisherman's boat had washed up empty, no sign of the owner. In 2008, a family camping on the beach reported their daughter missing. She was found 3 days later wandering the highway 12 miles south. She couldn't remember where she'd been or what had happened, just kept saying she'd heard voices calling her name. The pattern was clear. Something about that place attracted tragedy, drew people in, made them vanish, and always it involved the fog, always at night, always voices that shouldn't be there. I met Seth at 6. He looked as tired as I felt. We loaded his equipment into my truck and headed out. The sun was setting. The forecast called for heavy fog again. Right on schedule. By the time we reached the trailhead, it was already rolling in, thick gray tendrils streaming through the trees. "Here we go again," Seth said. "Yeah, you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." We geared up. Seth had the thermal camera. I had the audio recorder. We both had GoPros strapped to our chests. If anything happened tonight, we'd have it documented. We started down the trail. The fog was even worse than the night before. Within minutes, we were completely enveloped. Couldn't see more than a few feet. The forest was silent. No birds. No wind. Just our footsteps and our breathing. It felt like walking through a dream, like the world had narrowed down to just this moment, this trail, this fog. We reached the overlook and descended to the beach. The sand was wet, the tide was low, perfect conditions. We walked to the campsite. The fire ring was cold and empty. No sign of last night's fire. No sign anyone had been here at all. "Now we wait," I said. We found a spot near the fire ring and sat down, turned on our equipment. Seth monitored the thermal camera. I watched the audio levels. And we waited. 15 minutes passed. Nothing. Just the sound of the waves and the fog pressing in around us. Then 30 minutes. Still nothing. I was starting to think we'd made a mistake. That whatever had happened last night was a one-time thing. That we'd wasted our time. Then I heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Voices. 2 people talking in the fog. I held up my hand. Seth heard it too. He adjusted the thermal camera scanning the beach. I watched the audio recorder. The levels were jumping. It was picking up the sound, recording it. We had evidence. The voices got louder, closer. I still couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Conversational. Casual, like before. Seth's face had gone pale in the green glow of the thermal screen. "Anything?" I whispered. He shook his head. "Nothing, just us. No other heat signatures." The voices were very close now, maybe 20 feet away. I could almost understand what they were saying. Something about the weather, about the ocean. Normal things, everyday things. But there was something wrong with the cadence, with the rhythm. It sounded almost rehearsed, like actors reading lines. "Hello?" I called out. "Who's there?" The voices stopped, instant silence. We waited. My heart was pounding. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then, slowly, the voices started again. But this time they'd changed. This time I could understand them. "Cold tonight," one voice said. A man's voice, deep and rough. "Always cold," another voice replied. A woman's voice, soft and tired. "Should have brought better gear," the man said. "Should have stayed home," the woman said, back and forth. A normal conversation, except it wasn't. Something about it was fundamentally wrong. The timing was off, the inflection unnatural, like listening to a recording played at slightly the wrong speed. "This is Park Ranger Langston," I called out. "You're in a restricted area. I need you to identify yourselves." The voices stopped again. Then the woman spoke. "Ranger Langston," she said. "Aubrey Langston." My skin went cold. How do you know my name? We know, the man's voice said. We've been waiting. Waiting for what? For you to come back, the woman said. We have something to show you. Seth grabbed my arm. Aubrey, we should go. This isn't right. Not yet. We need to see. I raised my voice again. Show me what? What do you want to show me? The fire, the man said. The fire is ready. And just like that, light bloomed in the fog, orange and warm and bright, the campfire. Right there in the fire ring where it had been cold and empty just minutes ago. It was burning strong, fresh wood crackling, flames dancing, heat radiating out into the cold night. But we hadn't seen anyone approach, hadn't heard anyone. 1 second the ring was empty, the next it was burning. Seth, I said, tell me you're getting this. I'm getting it, he said. His voice was shaking. But Aubrey, there's still nothing on thermal, no heat signatures, just the fire and us. That's impossible. I know. We stood up slowly, moved toward the fire. It was real. I could feel the heat, could smell the smoke, could hear the wood popping. Around us, the fog swirled and eddied, and somewhere in that fog the voices continued. Come closer, the woman said. See what we've made, the man said. Who are you? Haida called out. What do you want? We're the ones who stayed, the woman said. The ones who didn't leave. Stayed where? What are you talking about? In the fog, the man said. In the cold, in the dark, we stayed. And now, we're not alone anymore. I looked at Seth. He was recording everything. His GoPro light cutting through the fog, his hands steady despite his fear. We should get closer, I said. Try to see them. Bad idea, he replied. We need evidence, real evidence, not just voices on a recording. Aubrey, but I was already moving, walking toward where the voices seemed strongest, toward the fire, toward whatever was waiting in the fog. Seth followed because he had to, because leaving me alone would have been worse. The fire grew brighter as we approached. I could see shadows moving in the smoke. Shapes that might have been people, or might have been nothing. Tricks of light and flame and fog. The voices continued their strange rehearsed conversation. Nice night for a fire, the man said. Every night is nice for a fire, the woman replied. Keeps the cold away, the man said. Keeps us company, the woman said. I reached the fire ring, stopped at its edge. The flames were real, definitely real. I could have reached out and touched them, but around the fire there was nothing. No one sitting, no one standing. Just empty space and fog. Where are you? I called out. Show yourselves. We're here, the voices said in unison, both of them at once. We've always been here. Then the fog shifted, moved, and for just a second I saw them. 2 figures, sitting on the ground on the far side of the fire. A man and a woman, both wearing old-fashioned clothing, both sitting perfectly still, both staring at the flames. Then the fog closed in again, and they were gone. Did you see that? I said to Seth. I saw something, I don't know what. I checked the audio recorder. Still recording, good. I moved around the fire. Slowly, carefully, trying to get another glimpse of the figures. But the fog was too thick. Every time I thought I saw something, it would dissolve, fade, become nothing. This is crazy, Seth muttered. We need to go. We need to get out of here. Just a few more minutes. I need to understand. Understand what? That there are ghosts on this beach? That we're talking to dead people? I don't believe in ghosts. Then what is this? I didn't answer. Didn't know how to answer. Instead, I kept moving. kept looking. The voices had stopped now. The fire continued to burn, and somewhere in the fog I knew those figures were waiting, watching. Then Seth's radio crackled. Static and interference. A voice came through, broken, distorted. "Unit 4, respond, situation at..." More static. Seth grabbed the radio. "This is Unit 4, say again." We didn't copy. Nothing, just static. Then the voice came back. Clearer this time. "Emergency at the lighthouse. Possible injury. All units respond." Seth and I looked at each other. The lighthouse was 5 miles north. If someone was injured, we needed to go. That was our job. But leaving meant abandoning this. Abandoning the investigation. Abandoning any chance of understanding what was happening here. "We have to go," Seth said. "I know." We took one last look at the fire, at the fog, at the empty beach. Then we turned and started back up the trail. Behind us, the fire continued to burn, and as we climbed, I heard the voices one more time. Faint. Distant. Already fading. "Come back," they called. "We'll be waiting." We're always waiting. We reached my truck and drove north as fast as the fog would allow. The radio kept crackling, giving updates. Someone had fallen near the lighthouse. Head injury, needed immediate assistance. We arrived to find another ranger already there with the injured hiker. He was conscious, alert. The fall hadn't been serious. Just a scrape and a bruise. He'd be fine. "False alarm?" Seth asked the other ranger. "Hardly false. Guy took a tumble. But yeah, he'll live." "Thanks for coming out." We helped load the hiker into the ranger's truck. He'd drive him to the hospital in Newport. Seth and I stood in the parking lot watching them leave. "Convenient timing," I said. "What do you mean?" "That emergency. Right when we were on the beach. Right when things were getting strange." Seth frowned. "You think someone called it in deliberately to pull us away?" "I don't know, but it's suspicious." We drove back south, back toward the beach. I wanted to see if the fire was still burning, if those voices were still there. But when we arrived and hiked down the trail, we found nothing. The fire ring was cold, empty. No smoke, no embers. No sign a fire had been burning there at all. "It's gone," Seth said, "like it was never here." "But we saw it. We recorded it." "Then let's check the recordings." We went back to the truck and pulled out the equipment. Seth's GoPro, my audio recorder, the thermal camera. We played them back. The audio was clear. You could hear the voices, hear the conversation, hear me calling out. But the video was a different story. The GoPro footage showed nothing but fog. The thermal camera showed nothing but me and Seth, an empty beach. Where the fire should have been burning, there was nothing, just cold sand. No heat signature, no flames, no evidence. "This doesn't make sense," Seth said. "We both saw that fire. We felt the heat, but none of the cameras picked it up. Except the audio. The audio has the voices. Voices, but no visual confirmation of who's speaking. Any skeptic would say we faked it, or that we're hearing things." He was right. Without visual evidence, we had nothing. Just our testimony. And no one would believe us. Hell, I barely believed it, and I'd been there. We sat in the truck as dawn started to break. The fog was lifting, slowly, revealing the beach, the cliffs, the ocean. Everything looked normal, beautiful even, like nothing strange had ever happened here. "What do we do?" Seth asked. "We file a report, include the audio, explain what we experienced, and we let the supervisor decide what to do with it. He's not going to believe us. I know, but we have to try." We drove back to the station and filed the report. attached the audio files, described everything we'd seen and heard, the voices, the fire, the figures in the fog. My supervisor listened, read the report, played the audio. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at us. "I believe that you believe something happened out there," he said carefully. "But I can't take this to the regional office. Can't open an investigation based on disembodied voices and a fire that doesn't show up on camera." "But we both heard it," I protested. "Both saw it. This isn't mass hallucination. Then what is it? Give me a rational explanation." "I don't have one. That's why we need to investigate further." He shook his head. "I can't authorize that. Look, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying the evidence isn't strong enough. Without visual confirmation, without something concrete, there's nothing I can do." "So we just ignore it?" "I'm saying we wait. If it happens again, if we get more reports, then we can revisit this. But for now, I need you both to move on. Focus on your regular duties." We left his office defeated. Seth looked angry. I just felt tired. We'd gone back to that beach, had recorded evidence, had done everything right, and still no one believed us. "This is bullshit," Seth said once we were outside. "We know what we heard, what we saw." "I know. But without proof, we're just two rangers with a crazy story. So, what now?" "Now we keep working, keep watching, and if those voices come back, we'll be ready." But they didn't come back. Not that week. Not the next. I did my regular patrols, checked that beach dozens of times. Never heard the voices again. Never saw the fire. It was like whatever had been there had gone dormant, or had moved on, or had never existed in the first place. Seth eventually requested a transfer. Said the coast wasn't for him. Said he wanted something less isolated. But I knew the real reason. That night had gotten to him, had shaken something loose. He couldn't look at the fog the same way anymore. Couldn't walk the beaches without wondering what might be waiting just out of sight. I don't blame him. Part of me wanted to leave too, but I stayed. This is my job, my responsibility, and someone needs to be here. Someone needs to watch, to listen, to remember. Because I know the truth. I know what's out there in the fog. I know about the voices, about the fire that burns but doesn't burn, about the figures that sit and wait and watch. I know they're still there, still calling, still waiting for someone to come close enough, to stay long enough, to listen. I've done more research since that night, dug deeper into the history of that beach, and what I found confirmed my suspicions. That place has a history, a dark one. Over 100 years ago, there was a shipwreck just offshore, a schooner called the Mary Catherine. She went down in a storm, 32 souls aboard, only 3 survivors. The rest drowned. Their bodies washed up on that beach over the following weeks. The locals buried them there, right on the beach, a mass grave. No markers, no ceremony, just holes dug in the sand and bodies rolled in. The maritime authorities said proper burials would happen later, but they never did. The bodies stayed there, forgotten, until a massive storm in 1947 eroded the beach and exposed the remains. They moved them then, relocated the bodies to a proper cemetery inland. But some of the old-timers say they didn't get them all. Say some of the graves were too deep, too old, too mixed with sand and rock to find. Say there are still bodies out there, still waiting. And maybe that's what we heard. Maybe that's what lit the fire. The ones who were left behind. The ones who weren't moved. Still there. Still trying to stay warm. Still having conversations that no one can hear except in the fog. When the boundary between what is and what was gets thin enough to cross. I don't know if that's true. Don't know if I believe in ghosts or spirits or restless dead, but I know what I heard, know what I saw, and I know I'm not the only one. There are others. People who've experienced the same thing, who've heard the voices, seen the fires, found the footprints that lead nowhere. Most of them don't talk about it, don't want to be labeled crazy, don't want to admit that something exists out there that can't be explained by science or logic. But I'm talking about it. I'm writing it down, because people need to know, need to understand that this coast is more than just beautiful scenery and hiking trails. It's a place where the past doesn't always stay buried, where the fog hides things that shouldn't be seen, where voices call out from the dark. If you ever find yourself on that beach, on any beach along this coast, and the fog rolls in thick and heavy, and you hear voices in the distance, conversations that don't quite make sense, don't go looking. Don't try to find the speakers. Don't think you're special or different or that you can handle what's out there. Just leave. Walk away. Get back to your car and drive. Because whatever you think you're hearing, whatever you think you're seeing, it's not for you. It's not meant for the living. And if you stay too long, if you listen too hard, you might end up like them. Might end up sitting by a fire that no one else can see, having conversations that no one else can hear, waiting in the fog for someone to come close enough to join you. My name is Aubrey Langston. I'm a park ranger on the Oregon coast, and this is my warning. The fog hides more than just the view. It hides the truth, and some truths are better left hidden. But if you see me out on patrol, if you pass me on a trail or in a parking lot, and you ask me about the beach, about the voices, about what really happens when the fog rolls in, I'll tell you what I tell everyone. Nothing. Nothing happens. Just tricks of the wind, just echo, just imagination. Because that's what my supervisor wants me to say. What the department wants everyone to believe. That the coast is safe. That the fog is natural. That there's nothing to fear. But late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment, when the fog rolls in off the ocean and presses against my windows, I hear them, faint, distant, but there, those same voices, having that same conversation, and I know they're still out there, still waiting, still calling. And someday, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, I'll hear my own voice join theirs. Will hear myself having that same rehearsed conversation with someone who isn't there. And I'll know that I've finally crossed that boundary, that the fog has claimed me, that I've become one of them, the ones who stayed, the ones who didn't leave, the ones who sit by fires that no one else can see and wait in the fog for company. I hope that day doesn't come soon. Hope I have years left before that happens. But I know it will come eventually. This coast takes everyone in the end, takes their stories, their memories, their voices, and adds them to the chorus that calls out in the fog. Listen carefully next time you're here. Next time the fog rolls in and you hear voices in the distance. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to the rhythm, the cadence, and maybe you'll hear me. Hear Aubrey Langston, park ranger. Still doing her duty, still watching the coast, still waiting.